the old historic canal by working with the Corps and the state to fill that canal in, and then use the credits that we would get from filling in that canal to offset the wetland credits that we would need in order to complete Riverside Drive. And so in order for us to continue to take Riverside Drive to the north, we'll need to get these credits. This plan is you know, it's spelled out for us in this. It will take probably about a year for the Corps to actually give us an approval, even though we've submitted to them. When we get that back, that will be the green light for us to be able to move forward with the construction of Riverside Drive, basically from Pony Express to Brookshire Drive. Sorry, Pioneer Crossing. Thank you. To go from Pioneer Crossing to Brookshire. Ultimately, we'll take this up and connect it up into Market Street, but for now, we're just looking at that first segment. This will address those wetlands. Also, you know, we'll be looking at trail enhancements through that area and other things. So this is a great opportunity for us. Obviously, it's a very important piece. In the future, if we are going to be disturbing more wetlands, we have more canal that we can continue to take this same type of an action plan down the southern part of the city, north of the marina, areas, you know, all along the lake. There's continual remediation that we could do, and we thought that this would be a good way for us to improve our shoreline, improve our trail connectivity, and improve the habitat along those areas.
Okay.
Happy to tackle any other questions. I apologize. Much more technical questions, I'm probably going to have to defer to Jeremy, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Questions from the council?
Do we know what kind of time, what kind of timeline that would give us as far as getting that trail pushed through?
I think it's probably going to be next year at this time before we'd see an approval, possibly March. But I think next year we'll be in that construction cycle, being able to utilize these mitigation credits, do the work, and then receive those credits.
The core process is going to take about a year.
We're not actually installing the trail, just basically creating the space where the trail would eventually be installed correctly.
Yeah,
correct.
I mean, and again, you know, throughout this area, we're going to have to identify the places where we can actually bring import in. In some cases, we'll just take the existing berm that's there. So if you can kind of picture the trail, there's usually kind of this canal area, then there's these large berms that are just kind of the overburden. We'll probably be using that overburden to basically fill the canal back in and restore that area so that there's not, right now, a lot of water gets trapped in those canals, and that's where we get mosquitoes and other pests and cougars. And I'm not talking the BYU kind.
The kinds that really do.
So this project isn't about the trail. It's about it's been labeled the Lakeshore Trail Canal. It's not about the trail. It's about that canal.
Mm-hmm.
The trail behind there, though, that is something that, as a city, we would be then putting in most of that trail because it's already all developed. There's no developer anymore.
Well, we've actually got some state funding that's going to be coming forward with that. So yeah, the development of that trail, continuing of that trail.
That's
the MAG money we've been pursuing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, a lot of times we can get MAG funds for those trail corridors.
They're coming.
Okay. There's nothing else. Then we'll go to the code amendment for Title 19, the MR zone.
Okay. So I wanted to go ahead and talk in work session about this code amendment. This is the residential we've talked about in the past, and the Planning Commission talked about it at length. At length last week at their Planning Commission meeting, and there were a couple items that I think that we've been working with D.R. Horton on this because they are the first potential applicants for the new mixed residential zone. In the mixed residential zone, they are annexing property, which hopefully the annexational agreement will come up at your next meeting, and they want this mixed residential zone applied to their property. So they've been really helpful in providing some information, and so we've been working with them fairly closely, and they wanted to have some opportunity to talk to you a little bit informally about a couple of concerns, not really concerns, a couple of points that they wanted to raise with the City Council. Specifically, there are two. One has to do with parking and parking for apartment buildings. They are requesting that a reduction in parking be allowed for the apartment buildings because it's going to be close to a future transit stop. The Planning Commission seemed to think that there was some rationale for that. And they directed the staff to come up with when that might be considered. So I've added some language. And then the second thing is we have a definition of how you measure building height in our development code, but the text and the picture show two different things. And so we're going to do an administrative amendment to change the picture so it coincides with the text. And they would like that just as a level of comfort, because one of the things we've been talking about is building heights for the various products. I'd be happy to, at this point, if you want me to, I could go over the changes that have been recently made to the proposed code and the Planning Commission action and their conditions. I could do that now, or I could do it during your regular session. It's at the end of the meeting. So the choice is really yours, whether you just want to talk about a couple things or whether you want to dive right in.
What was that?
Dive right in?
Councilwoman
Okay.
McCumber? You have a comment you want?
So I think that, as I was reviewing some of the key things, I just get nervous. I'll talk about the parking first, just so that, have some conversation there. One, we have no guarantee that this will ever be a transportation corridor. It might be, and it might be 20 years from now, it might be 5 years from now. There's no guarantee on when that would be coming through. And so you want to see a problem with parking, look out the window out of that conference room over there. Those apartments are always struggling for parking. And in fact, the only real conversations I've ever had with the residents in there is why did we allow the minimal parking that we've had in the Aldera apartments. So for me then to listen to that and then turn around and then reduce parking on another apartment complex just doesn't make sense. Another thing is a concern is the enclosed parking. I feel very strongly that there needs to be enclosed parking. It makes it a higher level apartment. And I'm okay with, the zone is allowing for apartments, et cetera, but I'm uncomfortable with having the not covered parking, the no garages. I think that one of the things about that is also it's nice is it's more storage space for the residents as well. They put a shelf up high. They put their Christmas decorations on the shelf. I mean, you see it time and time again. They use that space. They have their car in there, and then they can access it with like a shelf along both sides and the top around the garage door opener. And so I just think that Aldera Apartments, again, bringing it back to that, because that's our real apartment complex that we have in the city. It's actually a pretty nice complex, and they get to charge quite a bit for them. It's not cheap to stay in those apartments. And I think that the reason why is because, one, it's a beautiful city, and two, we made an effort to make sure that it was done nice. They have a nice utility, like recreation areas, and they have those garages. So that's just me, where I stand on those things. Can you list a couple of other ones? I know that.
Yeah, let me talk about them. And Dave, if you want to, there we go.
We have the list, and I can even just go down and.
If you want it, yeah, here we go. So the Planning Commission recommendations, these are the 7 things that they wanted us to take a look at and wanted to make changes in the draft code. The draft code that you all got a copy of yesterday includes addressing these recommendations. There were also some edits that were requested by the city attorney, and there were some of the red lines included language that the applicant was interested in, and then the Planning Commission, and then we also added the the section on modifications to the code, and added a section on building height, because we didn't previously have a specific section. So the first two deal with the building height, and previously the zone said 45 feet maximum building height, and the Planning Commission was uncomfortable with a blank 45 feet. And so what we've done is we've gone in and changed the standards table in 1904 to say that, and we've added another section to the actual zone itself, which says, excuse me, says 35 feet for single family, 40 feet for townhomes, and 45 feet for apartments. And that was the direction that the Planning Commission gave.
And I would be in agreement there on that section. I think that it's consistent with our single-family height throughout the rest of the city. And then also, we did spend a lot of time, was it last year, 18 months ago, I can't remember, talking about like if you have a dugout basement or a walkout basement, it's the height from the side of the house. And so there's really good standards, and we want to make sure that we're capturing those same things in this so that they have those same opportunities. So if you're on a slope towards, you know, yours is a pretty flat property, but this is not just for their property. This will be for any property in the city that can qualify for this zone and request it and then potentially get it. So I think it's just nice to make sure, because we do have a lot of land that's still undeveloped that slopes slightly, and then they can actually take advantage of the height and not lose it all by having an exposed basement.
Right, and Dave, if you want to go a couple slides where we talk about building heights, keep going. Okay, so if you go back, the way our building height code, the way it defines building height is basically a parallel plane from established grade to the midpoint of a roof, of a pitched roof. And if you go to the next slide, this is a picture of it, but as you can see, it doesn't go to the midpoint of the pitched gable, it goes to the top. So that's incorrect and we need to change it. But it does show that the existing grade, or the, is what is there before construction starts. And in the case of the piece of property that D.R. Horton is specifically interested in, they're going to have to bring in a whole bunch of fill. They are bringing in a whole bunch of fill.
It's already coming, yeah.
And so the existing grade for purposes of that development will be after the floodplain elevation is reached.
Well, and at that time, the engineer will
measured.
make sure, I mean, that
Right.
that it was done correctly.
So that's how it's
not
going to work. So
collapsible.
that's the little correction that we need to make.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because I think that we want to make sure that we also had a problem where people who were building up the hill, so when your house is up the hill, that they're putting the all the height in the front part of the house. So we also want to avoid that as well, so that it, yep.
Yeah.
Like see how it's showing here. So
Right.
that's important that we just keep all those things consistent, because that was it caused a problem. We have about 9 homes, I think, in the city that got in before
Yeah.
those kinds of things were caught. If you go back to the list again, I thought there was one other thing I was gonna.
Okay, so the third one was, this is something that the Planning Commission talked about a fair amount. The idea is that any use that's listed as a permitted or conditional use in the neighborhood commercial zone would also be considered conditional or permitted in the mixed residential zone as an option. So they did not, and it wasn't unanimous, but they did not want it to be a requirement that the commercial be done in a mixed residential zone, but they did want it to be an option, especially where there's a transit stop potentially associated with it.
So I'm not going to talk about this right now, but I do reserve the right to talk about this again, because there's some neat ideas, I think, that will be coming forward. So I won't speak about this right now, but tonight I think there'll be some opportunities, and I will reserve the right to speak again if that's okay, Mayor. On the next one here, I talked about that. That's the parking.
Right, the parking.
There's just, for me personally, there's just no way. We live in the West. If this was New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., and we had transit and we had Ubers waiting around for people to pick them up, everybody drives. Perfect example, I was just coming here, and Redwood Road was solid all the way back to the front of our building here on Redwood Road, because just everyone drives. And even reluctantly, even our kids, as soon as they turn 16, we live in a very affluent area, and we buy our kids cars. And I guess that happens when you have, I think our median income is like 70-something thousand now, over 80 now. So that's going to get you another car, especially since our houses aren't as expensive and we live in and our cost of living isn't too bad here in Utah. So even the kids started getting cars, and so I just feel very uncomfortable with that. So the next one.
Dave, if you want to go to the next slide.
So the signage, yeah.
So there was a fair amount of discussion about this as well. So what they indicated was that a 10-foot monument sign makes sense. That's sort of that's what's allowed. And then if there is the feature itself could be 20 feet tall.
Excuse me, how tall is the water tower?
Actually, the feature could be 45 feet tall, but the signage would have, any signage would have to be at the 20-foot level.
Okay.
Or lower, and that, with the way this is drafted, and you may or may not like it, is that a logo would be considered not signage and would be allowed on the architectural feature. And that, again, is sort of a...
The water tower's 30 feet.
30 feet. So I don't mind the entry feature. I think it is striking. It is important to, help identify the location. You're here, you're going to be at North Shore, and I like the lighthouse. I just don't want a real lighthouse. Right. So the problem with having the signage at the top and having it lit is it becomes somewhat of a lighthouse, because you can see it from very far away. I don't mind seeing it from quarter of a mile. When you're driving up, you come around, you can see it. Like coming up Redwood Road, you can start seeing the water tower and you know it's there. But with signage, words especially up on the top, when it comes to logos or architectural features, this is where we come into some muddy waters. If you put your, like, let's just use here, the LF, that's sort of like your legacy farms, but if you had like wheat on it or something, then that's more of an architectural feature, because as soon as you put the letters in there, it becomes a sign. I think that's where we had the hiccup with the water tower. So I love the idea of an architectural feature. I just don't think that we would want to have anything above the 20-foot mark in terms of being lit up and attracting. I'll let the rest of the council speak too, and I can be persuaded otherwise. But that's where I'm at with that. And then the open space, I think that.
The open space, yeah, there was a fair amount, and on the minimum. And hopefully, what we were trying to get at. Talked a lot with DR Hart about this. That open space, they could work with it. But
I actually think the amount of credits you'll get from your creative parks and different things, you'll actually get a lot of credits and points. Yeah, already with the things. And then the same definitions, yeah, it's just more of a clerical thing. Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to.
Just keep it consistent then. Great, thanks. I think those were the main 7 points, so I'll turn the time back over to you, Mayor.
At some point,
I just, no, you're good. I just wanted to ask Mr. McComber, on number 5, so are you okay with a feature being 45 feet but not a sign up at that location? Because our tallest buildings will be 40 feet.
Yeah,
And they've
as
been-
long, and like, because your tower's not lit, it's not
Right.
got
there's no
lights at
lighting.
night. And so I could be persuaded, just because you have the tall 40-foot multi-stack buildings.
Right.
Just because it's in, what's the word?
Scale.
Scale, thank you. The scale to those buildings, you don't want it to look mousy or like, not like it's, and the lighthouse is tall, and I get that. So again, for me, it comes down to just creating a beacon of light. And I actually was joking with Councilman Barch, because some sailor on Utah Lake sees that and they start just going, they think, we don't, I mean, Joe, it was just a joke, obviously, because it's inland so far, because lighthouses are usually on the edge. But really though, I think because of the scale, I could be persuaded as long as there's no lighting of it, or light going on top of it.
Okay. So you're okay with the way that 5 is drafted, and a feature could be 45 feet with no signage?
With a 25, above 20 feet, and then not lit. And then you could put architectural features, so like, you could have like one of those, the big wheel kind of thing, if you wanted something like that up there or whatever, but just not the words or letters.
No letters. That's where we get into it. That's okay. Because other,
But your wheat would look good on the other tower.
without the letters, it's just a buoy, right? A lifesaver ring.
Yeah, so but it still could look good on your water tower with the wheat tears, I think.
Right.
But,
I think
okay.
we can work through it and call
All right,
it.
thanks.
Thank you.
Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, going through those 7 points, I'm not going to go through each one. I guess since we have number 5 pulled up right there, I too would be fine with that as well, the way that that's drafted. I wouldn't want to see anything lit above the 20 feet. And
Can I ask a clarification on that? So from what I'm reading, there's actually there are 2 different heights in there, so it's 20 foot for a feature, and then later it says 45-foot feature. So which one are we talking about here? Am I mistaken in that?
Signage to 10.
for a monument.
Yeah,
The
no.
signage part, it's got a hyphen, so signage is 10 feet for a monument and 20 feet for a feature, period.
Okay,
Features can be 45 feet tall.
okay.
Right.
And the 20 feet is width.
Okay.
You can probably make sure.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as the feature being 45, I'm not going to go over the same comments. I agree with Councilman Cumber on that. Logo, I'm either way as long as it's not lit up to that height. But there's more history on that. Yeah. But I can understand, having maybe a couple initials or whatnot there with the logo. So going back to parking, again, it's just such a big problem in our city. The parking, I'd hate to see that reduced and have those residents deal with that, reduction of parking. So yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable in reducing that. Oh, thanks. And yes, I agree in doing also the 35 for single family and then up to 45 for the multifamily stack. So I like how that presented. Again, I agree with a lot of the comments made earlier, so I don't want to rehash those, but yeah.
Okay, Councilwoman Barch?
Okay, parking, I agree, it needs to be enclosed, and there's no way we're decreasing it. In 30 years, when maybe people aren't using cars because they're all sharing cars and I don't know what, taking transit, then that future council can look at it and change that if they want, and then those things could be used for other uses. At this point, though, that's not realistic. As far as the signs, I'm actually going to be a little different than the rest of council. The 10-foot, there is not a single place in the city where we've allowed a residential developer to have a 20-foot tall sign. The only thing we've ever allowed is to have a 10-foot tall sign, and then they could have a feature above that. It doesn't matter where. So the only time we've ever allowed for a 20-foot sign is in a regional commercial zone. Not even neighborhood commercial, not any place else. So for me, I think that we need to be consistent with the rest of our code, and we need to keep that with the signage at 10, and then we can let the feature go beyond that. What we've been consistently doing is allowing for their sign height to max out at their building height. So in this case, it would be 45 feet.
You allow their feature to?
The feature, yeah. But as far as the signage, personally, I think that we really need to maintain that consistency and not create this particular zone that, for whatever reason, has signage as tall as regional commercial. That doesn't make sense to me.
Can I ask a point of clarification, Mayor? Is that okay? So, Councilwoman, because this is a larger development, it is sort of has more of a regional commercial type feel because you have it master planned over a ton of acreage versus it being like a small community. I could see your concern if it was even right here, you know, with what this company actually bought and they're finishing it out. It's a smaller development. We're just finishing up the.
It's what we've done with Harvest. It's what we've done with Wildflower. It's what we've done with Mount Saratoga. It's what we've done with all of.
So Wildflower could go 10 feet and then their little tower thing goes above it.
And their tower is taller. That's what we told them they could do.
Okay.
So I would like to see us be really consistent as far as with the rest of the developments that we've done there. Other than that, as far as the height of the actual feature, I don't have a problem with that. And realistically, since it is a lighthouse, you could actually do something really cool with it and make it a small building, make it part of a future transit stop, I mean, you could do all kinds of things with it and actually make it useful, not just a feature. Make it part of your clubhouse, make it, you know, whatever. We have a similar type building on a smaller scale than I think what you're talking about, but in Harvest Hills, and we actually call it the Lighthouse. It's just kind of a little Cape Cod type building there on the corner in the Harvest Village commercial area. So it's very doable, even if you didn't do it as a.
So you weren't here 2 weeks ago and I joked about making it usable space up there, and I did some research. If you make it a residential building, then you don't have to have the elevator up to the top. Because there was some argument that you'd have to put an elevator in it. I did some research, but sorry, because I said the same thing a few weeks ago.
That's great. As far as the heights, I like the split height for the different housing uses. I like being able to go up to the 40 for the townhomes. That gives us some room for some of those 3-story with the live-work type possibilities in there. I think that that's a fine idea. Also, with the 45, with the stack, that also gives the ability, if the apartment complex wanted to do some kind of commercial on the bottom, they would have the space to be able to do that. So I think that's fine. Open space, I think that we need to stick with Title 19 again for consistency. I would like to see us look at that. One of the things that we used to do, and this is kind of, from what I've heard as we've gone through this, one of the things that we're trying to do is kind of replace our old PUD. And the PUDs used to have a lot more open space. So yes, you got higher densities, but that's because you compacted them in and then had more open space. And that's one of the things I think that we're missing in general in the PC, in this area. So personally, I think that's something that I would rather revisit, but at this point, I think we just stick with Title 19. So, let's see what else. Right. So.
Oh, the neighborhood commercial.
Neighborhood commercial. Dave, do you have those pictures? So this is one thing that I would actually like to bring up. I've done a whole lot of research, and I know that the applicant in their particular area has talked about using some of the townhomes, the bottom story of the townhomes, as possibly flex space, using it for commercial in the future when it's necessary and whatever else. So I did a bunch of research on it, and there are a whole bunch of different options. This is one in Tennessee. This looks a little bit more business-like, more office-like, but yet the top 2 stories are residential and the bottom 2 stories are retail, office, and things like that. There's another one, Dave. This is one of the floor plans. This is actually a D.R. Horton plan, and it's a little bit older plan, but nonetheless, where on this first floor you actually have, again, where it says B1, C1, AR, or A1R and B1R. Those are, they're different unit types with the right facing versus the left facing. But you've got the ability to have either residential on the bottom or to have possible future work on the bottom, office, however you're going to do it, but it's got access directly into the unit as well as into your living area up above. And then it looks, this particular one, Dave, if you switch to one of the other pictures, the one that says elevation. You can see that one looks more like a big townhome, but it's still the same kind of a unit. And then there's one more, if you don't mind. That's the, let's see. Yeah, that's the, how about the, oh, one of them's not on there. You didn't get the one from the Harriman picture. There's actually one in Rosecrest. You missed that one? You did get it?
He's got it. He's
Okay. I was going to send it to you again if you didn't get it. So this one actually exists up in Harriman in Rosecrest right now, and I actually stopped by today and talked to one of the business owners. And I said, okay, talk to me about it, what's going on, everything else. And he said he actually lives upstairs, owns the townhome, lives upstairs, and it has his insurance office down on the main floor. He said of the other 7 units, there are 2 buildings with 4 units each, 4 townhome units each. The others are mostly rented out. So the owners rent out to a business for that area.
So they buy the whole thing?
They buy the whole thing. Yeah, so this is the Harriman one. They buy the whole thing, but they live upstairs and then they rent out the bottom, or they can use it as their own office. They can, whatever. So there was like a daycare, there's a dance school, a preschool, the insurance office, a couple of other things. But he said that they are always full. They never, ever stay empty, and there's very, very little turnover ever.
And this is not near transit?
This is not near transit. This is in the middle of a development. It's a few units. Like I said, there are 8 units here that do this. It's surrounded by, these are rear-loaded townhomes. It's surrounded by rear-loaded townhomes without the commercial aspect in them. But I think that this is one of the things that, one of the problems that I've had is we've not been able to figure out a way to reserve the potential for commercial. And I think this is one of the ways to do that and still allow the landowners to go through their product and not having to reserve land for future commercial. So if we do, and it doesn't matter, the form they can do it in, they can make the townhomes look however they want, whatever their floor plans are. But it allows for us to reserve a potential commercial use in the future. And people that are moving into this area know that, yeah, it may be housing now, it may be used as part of a house, but it could be commercial in the future, and it's kind of ready to go.
And they would have the right.
They would have the right to do it or not do it as they would see fit, because they would own that townhome, but it would be kind of prepped and it's kind of prepped and ready to go. So that being said, I think that we can actually kind of solve some issues here. We can keep that. I actually would like to see, and I know that there was some concern about making it mandatory. This, by the way, is another D.R. Horton, and I love this because they show the different options of what you can do. You can do it as home office, as retail, or as family suite, which I think is kind of funny. But this gives, this is their product, yeah. But this gives the possibility for us to reserve some of that future commercial potential, get it prepared, and yet allow for the flexibility for both the landowner and then for that homeowner, how they want to use it. So for me personally, what I think we could do is with this kind of a scenario, say around transit, within a quarter mile of transit, or how we're going to do that, we're going to actually require some commercial in there, but it could be fulfilled by a standalone commercial, or it could be fulfilled by something like this, where it's a potential live work that when applicable, when it's ready, when it's primed, then they can use that.
They can convert it because it'll be built in preparation for it.
Yeah. So that's kind of some of the, it gives everybody kind of, it gives us the ability to reserve, and yet it really gives the landowner and the homeowner the flexibility to do what they want. So that's just kind of something that I found. Those are, I think, all of my comments. Nora, did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Thank you.
So.
Well, what about the neighborhood commercial uses throwing?
Oh, no, I think it's totally appropriate to have those neighborhood commercial uses, absolutely. There were a couple of uses that I kind of did question in the regular mixed. Equestrian center, really? In the middle of a R10 plus? That seemed a little weird. So, yeah, you can't have a riding range, but you can have horses. And then there was.
It'll kill a lot of space if they put it in.
This is true. There was one other like that too, but I'll find that when we come to the item later on.
Great, thank you.
All right. As far as the 45-foot max, I'm fine with that. For the stacked housing. As far as the neighborhood commercial, I'm also okay with that. I think that's kind of the those are the type of commercial uses we've deemed appropriate to have in a neighborhood, so that those all make sense. The entry monument, something was said, and I'm not sure, whether I'm misunderstanding what we're trying to do or whether we're just doing something different instead of doing what we've done in the past. But my thought was the max height should equal whatever the tallest building, because I know we're dealing with D.R. Horton's proposal here to some extent, but this is for the entire city.
Right.
And ideally, I would like to see some other large landowners that have planned community zone bring in village plans and say, we're just going to comply with the mixed residential use instead of rewriting code from the first block. So I would like to make this attractive to other developers that already have a lot of density grandfathered to them. So, so I think tying the height of the feature to whatever the tallest proposed building in their zone is makes sense to me, because we may have somebody that's only bringing in townhomes and single-family homes, or only single-family homes on different size lots. And so why would we want a 45-foot tall? That's good. So 35 or whatever. Yeah. So I like that idea, and it seemed like you were kind of hinting that that's what we've done with other people, so.
Well, I was thinking that, and then I was also talking about the fact that the actual signage part of their monument is
Right.
only ever at the 10-foot. Their features can be taller, but their actual signage is only that height.
Right. Yeah, I see Councilwoman Barch's point on that. I'm perhaps a little bit more willing to be convinced otherwise, but I think that the entry monument is important. It's an important feature because the whole point of this, if you look at the purpose statement of the mixed residential zone, it's to have a unified theme. And so if we're not allowing them to really get that theme, I don't want to limit their ability to create that unified theme and kind of the.
Just out of curiosity, so do you think that can't be done without signage at that height? You think that signage has to be taller than that in order to do that, or just the feature itself?
Well, I think the feature's part of it, but I also think, I guess my concern is in the past, we've decided that the letters L and F are considered signage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, something that I think would make, for one example, would make the water tower more attractive is actually being not allowed because we consider it a sign. So, I mean, I don't necessarily want, a big sign that says Harvest Hills backlit at 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just an LF painted on the side of them, I think that there's, as was alluded to by the developer, I think that there's a common ground that we can get to there. I don't want lit up signs at that height, but, if we're going to consider everything that has alphanumeric text a sign, then maybe 20 feet's not a bad idea, as long as it's not backlit or powered or something like that. So I'm not entirely positive of where I'm at on that. I just, I think that more conversation is needed on that. Open space, I think we should be complying with the current Title 19 just for consistency's sake. If there's problems with what's in Title 19 not getting us what we think we need to be getting, then we need to adjust Title 19 across the city, not just for one zone. The parking and the commercial. Now, we've had a few discussions on this. It seems to me that the argument from the developer is we're next to transit, so we should have reduced parking. And then we asked for some commercial, and they said, well, we're not next to transit yet, so we shouldn't be required to have commercial. While I agree, I tend to lean towards this zone of making commercial a option, something that maybe we incentivize through various steps, but it seems like you're kind of trying to have your cake and eat it too. Either you're next to transit or you're not next to transit. You can't get a reduction in parking because you're next to transit and not have commercial because you're not next to transit. You either are or you aren't. So that's kind of, I mean, I get the rationale saying we're going to be next to a track stop. We want to reduce parking.
Right.
If you were next to a currently existing track stop, I would say yes.
Just to clarify, the way that the parking that Nora has written at the .75 actually is the same as what you're requiring currently. It's not a reduction unless we build all one-bedroom units. If you build a 3-bedroom unit, the way that that translates is 2.25 parking spaces. So it's the same parking requirement.
Okay.
And I don't know if anybody picked up on that, because the way that it's written, it says it's written as for every bedroom, it's .75 parking spaces. So we would only receive a reduction in parking if there's a reduction in residents.
Okay. I guess that's not the way I understood. I understood that you were just looking for.
That's why I wanted to clarify.
Because
I don't know if she has the language that you can read it, but it reads that if for every bedroom, you would receive .75 parking spaces. So if I have a 1-bedroom unit, I would be required 1 space, right? If I have 2 bedrooms, it's 1.75 2 times, which is 2 spaces, because I can't do it's 1.5 spaces. If it's 3 bedrooms, it ends up at 2.25. 3 bedrooms is the same parking requirement, and your current code in Title 19 reads kind of the same way. You have to have 1 parking space for every 1 bedroom, but it's not ever more than 2.25.
Okay. I guess I'd need some clarification, from staff, making sure that what I just heard from the developers. Not that I distrust you, I just want to make sure that, because that's totally different than the way I read the.
Want it consistent.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah,
ask
go
a
ahead.
question? But if we had, what? Oh, it is on. I just need to eat it, apparently. Now I just made myself laugh. What am I? Oh. Parking, but if you build 4 one-bedroom apartments, then that would require 3 parking spots, whereas right now the code would require 4, so it is a reduction.
Right, it is a reduction, because it's located next to our thought, you have to do something to encourage all of your opinions. As I move forward, urge people to
You mean like parking on the street?
I make the transition when the transits could be 15 years away.
I was just,
You have to make, that's the standard now.
I was just, sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to make the point, it is a reduction.
Yeah, okay.
Mathematically it is. So I know what you were saying, but it doesn't always round up, so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you have four units, you're going to have 4 cars in reality, at least. That's assuming that none of the single bedroom units are rented by a young couple that both drive. Or roommates, or 6 college students, so.
But what it would allow is a common park, if somebody were to do a completely different model with it than what they're talking about, and have underground parking or first floor parking, then it would allow a reduction, because you calculate it on the total number of bedrooms, .75 for the total number of bedrooms, and then they could put it in structured parking underneath. That's the apartment building I live in is like that. So in that case, the way it's drafted, it would definitely result in a reduction in parking, and that would be an option under our current code. Well, the option of the configuration.
Code of our Title 19 code?
Or of this proposed?
Okay, I didn't explain that very well. So you can do apartments of many different configurations.
In our city right now.
Right, and one of the configurations you could do includes common underground parking. And you could do that in our code right now. It would be at the old, at the ratio of one space per bedroom, basically. But what this would allow is if you were to use that model for apartments, you could reduce the parking to .75 per bedroom, so there would be fewer parking spaces.
I guess, if we're gonna go this route or whatever, you know, I know that there seems to be a lot of trepidation of going this route. I would want to say that there needs to be a minimum, like an aggregate minimum of 1 per unit. Because if you can have a mix of 1s and 2s and 3s, I mean, I lived in a 3-bedroom apartment out of school, and, you know, the other 2 bedrooms were occupied by my young daughter and my young son, neither of which drove. So, you know, they don't need the necessary, you know, I need 2.5 or 2 1/4 parking spots for a 3-bedroom, but I only had 2 cars. So, but I also don't want to end up in this situation where we have four units and only 3 parking spots. So,
Made him wait this long.
I did. It's been really good.
the flex space that was shown by Councilwoman Barsh, I'm intrigued by that. That's kind of that's along the lines, especially the stuff in Rosecrest was kind of an interesting product, as well as, you know, there had been some discussion of, you know, maybe having some flex space that was used by the HOA until such a point as commercial became option, and then that's something that the HOA could then rent out or lease out and have as a source to help pay for their amenities that they're, you know, instead of paying for the clubhouse all by themselves, they can make a little profit off of this commercial space. So I'm you know, I guess for me it's, you're going to have to choose whether you're next to transit or whether you're not, because you can't say we can't do commercial because we're not next to transit, but we need less parking because we're next to transit. So it just doesn't seem consistent to me.
Okay, Councilman Wilden?
Turn it on. To clarify, for right now, we're sticking to these recommendations, not other items, just, okay. So well, that seems like what everyone else does. I do have other things, but I'll hold to that. If you could go back to the prior. Multifamily height, I think we were all okay with that, so I'm not going to comment on that. Item 3, good with that. Item 4, which we were just talking about, the parking. To kind of look at a compromise, I would be okay with it with 2 conditions. It's, you can't have less than 1 per unit. So if you have an apartment building with only, or not an apartment building, sorry, an apartment with only 1 bedroom, it rounds up to 1. Where you could get a benefit is if you had a 4-bedroom apartment. I don't know if that would be in your product, but then you could get 3 there. But there's always parking issues, like Harvest Hills is a good example. We have some condos up there that people park along the street, and I know enforcement's a whole different conversation. I won't go there. But if we're allowing any type of reduction, I'd want the parking to be enforced by the HOA, and that be clear in the CCNRs and actively, not policed, but monitored, because it is a significant problem when you go on Harvest Hills, especially Councilwoman Barge could speak to it more. She goes in that area probably more than I do. There's a lot of cars parking along that street, and it does cause the hazards and that other type of thing. But for me, I could get comfortable with this. I'm going to call it a reduction. I'm sorry, I don't follow the example you're telling me. I'm a visual person, and it's just not visualizing in my mind right now. So I'm going to call it a reduction. I'd be okay with this reduction if we made it a minimum for at least 1 per unit in addition to the 0.75 with HOA mandatory enforcement. And then if we could go to the next slide, that's what my hand wave meant. I'm kind of more on the lines with Councilwoman, do you like that? Councilwoman Barge, I mean, and that's in my notes. I'd like to see it consistent with what we've done other places, such as in Legacy Farm around the Heights. I like Council Member Porter's comment. If the maximum building height you put in there was townhomes, it'd be limited to that. Maybe we can talk about a logo if it was limited to like 2 initials or something like that. I don't know if we could really define it 2 letters or something that's not lit. If there's a way to clarify it and make it part of a feature, I don't know. I agree with item 6. Let's just follow the current code, and I think that's, Nora, is that everything on that list?
Yep.
Okay.
transit as an option someday down the road. Right now, we got one bus that's pretty much useless morning and night in Saratoga. But I'm sure for a 1/4% sales tax increase, UTL promises something. But in the corridor that's being preserved, maybe that could be used for parking. So if you went with the new code, the need for parking requirements to meet today's need could be put into the transit corridor. And then when the transit actually comes and you go back to this other route, then that parking could be removed and your transit would be there. Just something to noodle on between now and agenda item 8 at the end. So, okay. What's that? Do you have anything you want to add before we go to policy session? Then we'll get back to you guys on item number 8.
I think with the clarification on the parking, that was our only concern. We appreciate your comments and getting us that input. I think that the building height with the new definition that Nora has come up with resolved my concern. I don't know if we have that building that's going to be 40 feet. I emailed it to Nora and David.
Yeah, I didn't
but
put it in there.
just so you could see what we are proposing. We have designed, and that's why my trepidation, we've designed a specific building to go along that frontage of Saratoga Road, and it's 40 feet 7 inches tall. So if we go from the foundation to the peak of the roof, it wasn't going to work.
Nora, you've got an elevation of that, Nora?
New elevations. I just emailed it to
we
David.
can-
I
I
don't
can
know if
put
it
it in
came
the-
up.
Okay, could you do that so when we get back to this item, we can see that?
But that, I think that we'll be okay with the new midpoint of the roof. We should be able to make everything work. Right, the way
Perfect.
that it should be. So I think we're good. But we appreciate that and your consideration on the feature. We feel like Legacy Farms Water Tower is missing something, right? The wheat shafts are an architectural feature, yes, but we don't use the wheat shafts on anything but our logo for our letterhead, and it says Legacy Farms underneath it. So it's not really the icon that identifies everything. We're just looking for something that could consistently brand, and if it is just that icon with a couple of letters, that's really kind of what we're looking for. We would comply with your dark skies, the lighting. We don't want it to be a beacon either. But we do want it to be noticeable above the height of our tallest building so that it is what your eye finds and comes to. It would be centrally located. It's not going to be out towards the streets. We're going to put it back next to the 180-foot corridor so that in the future it does become that spot.
When they're coming in.
Right.
The initials have to be SW, though.
Right.
So,
We'll just turn it upside down and almost make it look
so
like
are you okay with the 10-foot versus the 20-foot if we, maybe a compromise, if we allowed the maybe 2 letters like on your logo up higher, and then you could have this the 10 feet? Because I'm really leaning towards the consistency of code, and if we've also, if we force this on Harvest, we force this on
Right.
Wildflower, I don't feel comfortable.
And we want to be an equal player as well. We
So
understand
if we have the
that.
10-foot, but then maybe compromise and allow the logo with the initials maybe
little
at
bit
the top.
higher.
So it's not words.
Right.
It's your logo, like,
We would be fine with that, because if you remove the.
Are you okay
the-
with that,
The
Cal?
letters, it's just a life preserver.
well, and I think that really it is a logo with the letters. It's not, I feel like I can, for me personally, I can lean that way. If you're willing to keep that consistent with the North Shore big words at the bottom.
Right, we
Okay.
can do that.
Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Chrisella
Mark?
did put up the elevations there.
Well,
Just
it
they're looking
depends
at-
on which 2 letters, because
Oh.
2 letters could form a word. So,
Not if they're offset.
but also, we can talk more later.
We're making progress, Mark. Okay.
So Dave just put up the
So this is the
elevation.
product. This would be this would be our live-work unit, like what Shelley was showing. It would front Saratoga Road. This is our 3-story that we'll create, and these are just our rough draft, right? We're still working on it, but it would create that live-work space and be the front to the
First
community.
floor could be either living space or
Right, we call it a flex
converted
space.
into a.
Right.
I like them. I like your deck covers, making it four-sided architecture, but
Right, and we added the deck. We don't normally do a deck, but we felt like because these face the lake, there would be opportunities to
Oh, yeah.
capture those views. So,
Perfect.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will move into the City Council policy session for the City of Saratoga Springs on Tuesday, April 17th, 2018 at 6:57 PM. Present tonight is Councilman Podeska, Wilden, McComber, Barch, Porter, and myself. We do have a quorum. I've asked Councilman Porter to lead us in our invocation and Councilman McComber to lead us in our pledge this evening.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity for us to gather together to conduct the business of the City of Saratoga Springs and its residents. And we ask Thee to please bless us with discernment and with wisdom that we can make decisions that will benefit the residents and the city as a whole now and into the future. We ask Thee to please remind us of the blessing it is to be able to live in a free country where we have the ability to govern ourselves. We ask Thee to please bless first responders and the members of the armed forces that are serving overseas. Protect those freedoms. And we say these things in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Will the audience please rise? Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay. Public input. Time has been set aside for the public to express ideas, concerns, and comments. Please be respectful in your comments. Please try to avoid repetitive comments. Please state your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. David Johnson's got a clock for that. If you're here for the public hearing tonight on the sewer revenue bonds, please hold your comments for the public hearing. Is there anybody here for public input tonight? You want to come up and state your name and address for the record?
My name is Jocelyn Hansen. My address is 3076 Lori Lane. I'd like to request, I'd like to petition an independent audit to be done on the utility department. I'm having huge inconsistencies in my water bill, and when I call, they admit that the readings sometimes don't happen at all, and they're just guessing on a lot of my bills. When I opened this for discussion today in a Facebook page in my neighborhood, I've had at least 5 other residents with the same complaint. Today when I called about a $200 water bill, I was treated terribly by Marquette. So I've since talked to, I think his name's Owen Jackson, and he was excellent. I don't know if he's here, but he was wonderful. He was wonderful, but many times I'll get the runaround like you're probably taking too many showers or things like that. And this is, I had a water bill in the summer that was almost $400, and it was before we were watering our backyard. But every time I call, I get the runaround. And so I'm requesting that an independent audit or some kind of a city audit. I think we do have a city auditor, don't we, for the utilities department or someone that we could use. But I would like an independent audit done if possible. And I'm willing to email just from this page that I brought up 2 hours ago. A discussion has started, and I think so far I've gotten maybe 7 similar stories just within my neighborhood.
So are you talking culinary water or secondary water?
They have admitted, depending on who I talk to, that both my irrigation water has been misread. Either I get zeros on my statement, that there's no reading present at all, or else I'll get a reading that's like 250 units. So there's that much of a disparity from bill to bill. And it's both the irrigation water that's misread sometimes and the culinary. And I'm also being charged late fees. When I call and say I will only pay part of my bill, I'm not sure that what you're billing me is fair, then they will charge me a late fee. This month alone, I've received 3 different bills. I have them here. All 3 bills said that they were due at the end of April 25th or something like that is the due date. Each bill was different, and I got a notification that they are shutting off my water tomorrow, even though I'm not supposed to be billed until the 25th, if that makes sense.
Mark?
Owen just stepped out. I'd like to have an opportunity to let him come chat with you again, as well as walk through this. I know that they had come to a resolution
Yes, he
earlier today.
spoke with me on the phone today.
Happy to work with her on this particular issue.
Okay, and you and I need to talk too, also.
And the reason why I'm here is not just to represent myself, but everyone on that Facebook page. So I know that Owen and I are having a discussion, but I wanted everyone here to understand that this is not just an issue for myself. It's people are being taken advantage one way or another, so I want the problem to be solved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody here for public input? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public input. I'm going to adjust the agenda tonight and move business items 1 and 2 up to the next. I've talked with Councilman Chris Porter. He will take business item 1.
All right, business item 1, is the appointment of the Veterans Advisory Council of Brandy Tylo and Robert Ellis. Tilo, sorry. I'm sorry. I haven't had a chance to verify pronunciation. So, Brandy Tilo. And I guess the mayor was kind enough to let me speak to this just because this is something that is near and dear to my heart. This constitutes filling the last spots, I believe, on the Veterans Advisory Council. And so I'm also happy to welcome Brandy Tilo, since she's Navy. I'm also from a Navy family, so it's always fun to, we don't get many Navy here in Utah. So, are they here? Robert, please come up and introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of background. We have your application here, but yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to not only serve my new community, because I just moved here from California to this beautiful state, and to continue to serve my fellow veterans in any capacity that I can. So far what I've seen and what I've experienced in this community has been very pleasant, and we're glad to be here. So anything I can do to help our veterans, let me know.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just like to follow up his comments and say that something that is, I've noticed when working with the council, we've had several meetings so far, and working with the current members as well as I'm sure the new members, is they've been an absolute exemplary example of what service members do is they want to serve their communities, they want to be involved, they want to make the lives of those around them better, and after years of service in the military, they love to serve in their communities as well, and so it's an honor to have been able to serve with them and to spend time with them. And so,
okay.
Do you want me?
Just as an observation, both Brandy and her husband are both veterans, and they live down in my community. They're phenomenal people. Love them and thrilled to have them serving.
All right. Excellent.
That's great. It's great to have a full board here, especially as we get ready to open Patriot Park and get that honor here in our community. And we'll be relying on you heavily as we get ready to do that next spring. And could you maybe come up for the YouTube viewers?
So I just wanted to say that they've been really involved in helping with the monument and figuring out how to do that. And we've been discussing fundraisers to help veterans that maybe can't afford to place their name, that they can apply to, that we could have a scholarship there. So to make sure that we're honoring just, all the veterans in our community. So it is an honor to work with them and to meet with them, and it's been a very neat opportunity for me, where my father is a veteran, but I'm at the bottom of the family, so I haven't heard a lot of the cool stories. But just to be able to work with them and to be able to understand some more about our servicemen and everything, they're a great group of people, so I'm really excited about what we can do to serve the veterans in our community.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilman Porter, for your work with this committee, and thank you for your willingness to serve. Okay, item,
Mayor, can I ask a question?
oh, yes, I need to.
I just wanted to, how many board positions are there? What is a full board?
There's 7.
7? Just out of curiosity, if someone else wanted to volunteer, do we turn them away?
No, I mean, we're always looking for people to help volunteer. There's just the 7 people that are on the board, but we, anybody else that wants to help with this, with, honoring the veterans, we've got activities and things that we always need extra hands, so.
Okay.
In a growing city, we're never short of opportunities.
I knew you wouldn't turn them away. I didn't mean that, but I just.
It's on the record now to get more.
Yep.
Yes.
Good job.
Okay, thank you. Okay, resolution. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the appointment of Brandy Tilo and Robert Ellis to the Veterans Advisory Council Resolution R18-20 dated today.
I have a first from Councilman Porter, a second from Councilwoman Barch. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Councilman Podeska? Aye. Wilden? Aye. McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have the appointment to the Planning Commission. We've had 2 vacancies on the Planning Commission. The last 2 times we've had to fill vacancies, we have had probably the best success in well-qualified applicants. This round, as Councilman McComber and I were talking earlier, we've had, usually there's a few that you're like, well, not a lot of planning experience, but this time it's safe to say we've had some amazing residents, and not just residents with planning experience, residents who have been heavily involved in the community and serving here. Tonight we have an appointment for one of those positions. With that, Chris Karn, he's probably been our #1 YouTube viewer for his, what was that? Yeah, our viewership's down tonight by here.
Down by like 70%.
So if you'd like, take a minute and come up and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chris Karn. Do you need my address?
No.
Okay. So as a brief introduction, my wife Angie Karn and I have been married for 16 years. We have 4 daughters and have lived in Saratoga Springs since 2005. We bought our first home in the Saratoga Springs development and are currently in our second home. Professionally, I work for a global telecom company. I work from home, so I'm in the city 99% of my time. I don't leave that often. I'm from the Chicago area, and I come from a town that started at 20,000 residents, and it's grown to about 150. So it's on the same long-term projection as I think as our city in this area. So I've seen what positive planning can do for a city, both good and bad, and I think the positive impact that proper planning and zoning can make. And so I'm excited to be part of that process. I've served in my own community for 5 years on my HOA board. I've been the president for 2 years, and I'm just really excited for the opportunity. I'm appreciative to the mayor and the council, and I'm excited to work with staff and get started.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I will entertain a motion for the recommendation that I have.
I move that we appoint for the Planning Commission Christopher Karn, Resolution R18-21 dated today.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman McComber. Second. Second from Councilman Podeska. Any further discussion on the motion? This is for a 4-year term.
Yep.
Councilman Podeska? Aye. Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion passes
Got you now.
unanimously. Okay. We'll go back to reports. Councilman Porter, do you want to report on our activities for the day?
Yeah, today Mayor and I had the opportunity to go up and attend the bill signing for House Bill 257. This is creating a Sentinel Lands designation for land around Camp Williams. This is a follow-on to the JLS and the ACUB that we've been working on in the city and with Camp Williams for several years. And so they're creating a opportunity for the communities around Camp Williams to cooperate with the camp and protect the purpose and the things that they're doing up there on camp that are important for our national security, as well as the training of the National Guard that help us here in the state. And so I think it was a great thing. We were there with Harriman and Harriman's Yeti.
Yes.
So
still looks like the Bumble.
So it was a great opportunity to spend some time with the service men and women that are up at camp and to celebrate a success for them. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members with report? Councilwoman Barch?
Couple of things. We were going to have the Lego Service Club come in. I was going to introduce them to you. They will actually come in next meeting. They had soccer games that they'd kind of forgotten about, so that'll happen next time. Also, I had attended the Tree City USA Awards with Rick Kennington and Nick Andreasen. We've received that for the 4th year in a row, and just a couple of highlights really quickly that we were able to share with everyone in receiving that award. We have 3 certified arborists currently, and we're about to have a 4th. One is taking his test, and I haven't heard if he's passed yet or not, but I'm pretty sure he probably has. We have had scouting projects planting trees throughout the city. We have worked to save, especially thanks to Councilman Comber spearheading that, numerous trees along Redwood Road. One significant tree, some 6-inch plus caliper mature tree that we were able to save because of that.
We not only saved the one moved, but then they worked around 5 other trees. We were going to maybe move those as well, but they were able to work around it and saved 5 more trees at this caliber as well.
Which is phenomenal. And then also the fact that we've been planting along the canal trail, trees in preparation. We've got several trees that are going to become dangerous to homes as they continue to mature and start dropping limbs, and they're not quite the appropriate tree for the specific areas where they're at. And so our Parks Department has seen fit to go in and plant trees now, getting them starting to mature, so that when they have to take them down here in the future, that we won't have these huge big gaping holes, but we'll kind of continue that that canopy without completely making everything bare. So that's been really good. We really appreciate everything that they've done, and we've got lots more planned, especially with Patriot Park coming online. Another couple hundred trees with that we'll be adding to the city. So we've got lots of projects, and for the scouts out there, as you're looking towards your projects, we've got planting projects for you. So kind of some fun things that they learned. They also did their, continuing education credits at the same time. But some interesting things that we might have Rick present to the council at some point, and possibilities for raising trees and helping have better stock. So.
If I can add to that, sorry, over here.
Yes.
The great and powerful laws. Yeah.
I know, it's like.
Anyways, this Saturday, Rick and his staff are working with the Boy Scout troop to do a planting at 9 a.m. at Island Park, which I'm not as familiar which neighborhood Island Park is.
Is that this city? Because I thought they were doing the mountain bike park this Saturday.
They're doing both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
with the Boy Scouts, and then Rick with the
Mountain Bike Club.
Mountain Bike Club.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, it's at Island Park, not to be confused with Inlet Park. So, but if you look online, you can find on our city maps where Island Park is located at. So, at 9 a.m.
Very good. That's right.
Okay. Councilman Comber.
Speaking of trees, now that they're starting to bloom, let's take some of these arborists that we have within the city and go and inspect some of these trees that were planted in the last 18 months that haven't survived, and making sure that that is reported to the developers who are required to have surviving trees in their developments, especially along Redwood Road, and making sure that those are getting replaced. Especially while they're still within their warranties. Hopefully those developers have warranties with their landscaper. But also just our own trees within our own parks, making sure that we're getting the trees removed, the dead trees, and replaced as quickly as possible. Since we're asking developers to do it, we require a certain amount of trees in our neighborhoods. We need to make sure that we're being good stewards within our parks as well. Thanks.
Okay, Councilman Podeska.
I just wanted to report on, we met again on the design phase for the police department building, and we will be having something coming forward in a work session for us to review and give feedback. Can't remember what date that was.
It'll be the next meeting, first meeting in May.
Okay, yeah.
We'll have a work session, a couple conceptual drawings before we go too far down the design. Wanted to get some feedback. I think we've got the workable space figured out, but it's just more the look.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Mark, anything from staff at this time?
Not at this time. We will have need for a closed session this evening, though.
Mayor, if I could take, Mayor, could I take a few minutes?
Yes.
Just like to introduce you to our two new staff members.
Okay.
We just had 2 new planner ones start yesterday. And so sitting over here is Ryan Harris and Jenna Albers. I guess they could take a moment or two if they want to introduce themselves and give a little background.
Not all at once.
My name's Ryan Harris, and I have 5 kids, and we've lived here in Saratoga Springs for 7 years. I live in the Fox Hollow neighborhood, and previously I worked at Provo City for 10 years. In the last 4 years I've done code enforcement there and some planning, and I graduated from the University of Utah in 2009 in city planning.
Okay. Welcome.
I'm Jenna Albers. I'm originally from upstate New York, but I came out here for school and just liked it so much I decided to stay. I did my undergrad at BYU and just finished my master's at the U. And yeah, yeah, and I've worked mainly for private sector. I've done some work at the Church History Library Historic Sites as well as the Downtown Alliance in Salt Lake City. So I've been around, and it's a great area to work in, so I look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you. Okay. Perfect. We will move on to the public hearing. We have a public hearing for the Sewer Revenue Bond, Series 2018. Mark, do you have?
Yeah, happy to take that one. Mayor and Council, last meeting, we passed a parameters resolution which kind of set the upper limits and the outside limits on issuing some utility bonds for our sewer department. In essence, this will be money that will be used to begin the gravity outfall system. As it currently stands, all of the city's effluent or sewer is pumped from 2 lift stations. What this will do is it will take and begin a series of projects that will ultimately remove everything west of Redwood Road off of the lift stations and move them onto gravity utilities, which will save us costs, maintenance costs, pumping costs. The bigger issue is really the upsize cost, because the more we grow, the more we're going to have to grow these lift station facilities. Whereas if we take and implement this gravity system at this point, we will not need to expand our lift stations any more than they currently are. We'll replace motors and things like that, but we won't have to expand the storage capacity, the wet wells, or add additional pumps to this.
This also reduces our corrosion in our pipes from the pressurized effluent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits from this. So ultimately, this will be the first. We're going to use about $3 million that we have cash on hand, in addition to about $10 million in bonds. We anticipate that we would spend that both this summer as well as probably next summer on starting these gravity lines. The first gravity line will extend from the corner out by the new D.R. Horton product, 2300 and Old Saratoga Road, kind of that intersection, and it will take a gravity line and extend it to the west side of the river. So we'll actually hang the gravity line across the river, and then what that'll allow us to do is realign our gravity sewer. We'll be working with developers for about another $13 million worth of projects. It's for a total of about $26 million projects in this first phase of implementing the gravity lines. And so ultimately, we're building capacity. We're building, we think this bond will get us probably till about 2028 or 2030 before we would need to look at future city-funded expansions in our sewer system. So it's the right move, and we're looking forward to moving forward with that, and be happy to have any public comments on the bond at this time.
And this has been part of our long-term planning, and this is also a accumulation, and staff's done a great job, council's done a great job in bringing landowners and developers in with the city to make this so that the residents are not bearing the burden of close to a $30 million project probably overall. We're only bearing kind of the backbone and then those who are impacting the system will be bearing their own costs rather than the residents. So this has been part of the long-term plan with the city. There are comments from the council before I open the public hearing? Okay.
Actually, I do have one.
Okay.
I think this might be good for the public to know that we are not raising the rates as a result of this, that sewer is paying for sewer, we're not raising property taxes, and this is allowing this to be paid for by residents today and who will be moving here in the future. It's not fair for residents who live here now to have to bear the whole burden for people who are going to get the benefit of this sewer system 15 and even 20 years down the road. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll open the public hearing on the sewer revenue bond. Please be respectful in your comments. Please state your name and address for the record. Please try to avoid repetitive comments, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is anybody here for, yeah, Councilman Comber just said, is anybody here to talk crap?
You out me. I don't have the microphone on.
Effluent.
Effluent, yes.
He actually said poo.
Okay, if seeing no public comment at this time, I will close the public hearing portion. There's really nothing to approve, but is anybody else in the council has a comment? Okay.
Now, my only comment is I appreciate, you know, the rest of the council brought this up and staff being creative. Sometimes it's just easy to say, hey, we're going to bond for $15, $18 million, but reaching out to developers, negotiating with them. So I appreciate the hard work on staff's part for that. So that's a big win for the residents and the city and everyone. So.
Okay. Moving on to business item 3, Mountain Land Head Start, conditional use permit and site plan.
Mayor and Council, Mountain Land Head Start has found the need to build a facility here in the Saratoga Springs area, and they've actually acquired property a year ago to do that. And so they would like to receive site plan approval and conditional use permit approval to build on this parcel you see here in the blue next to the Horizon Special Needs School in Thunder Ridge Elementary. Just to show you the site plan here, they propose a 3,500 square foot building, associated parking, the playground in the back with access off Murray Way. Just to point out, they did try to get access on Thunder Ridge property to the west, and that was denied. That was one of the first ideas we brought to them, and so they did have to provide access onto Murray Way. Now, we did receive an email today via Councilmember Barch sent to me from a Julie King, who is the district community council member for Horizon School, and she's just brought up some concerns with parking and traffic and that sort of thing, and has suggested that there be red curbing along the north side in front of Horizon and in front of Mountain Land Head Start.
Okay. Perfect. Councilwoman Barch.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is a lot better than the very first iteration that they brought to us. It has improved. I still have incredible heartburn, and I don't think this is the appropriate place to be putting this school because of the incredible amount of impact already felt by the residents in this current area. That being said, I do have a couple of questions. One of the things is I don't see where their refuse bin is. Dave, do you know where that is located and how that's accessed?
They're doing individual cans. They've got a little, the detail, there's a little shed where I think it's this one, yeah, right here, trash bin storage. So it's just a little covered shed, like a Rubbermaid type thing. Sits three,
so like a normal residential trash can?
Yeah. Yeah, and they'll keep it behind the fence in this little container. The cans themselves will be.
That's a little astounding to me. I have dealt with many schools. I've never dealt with Head Start in particular, but the amount of paper and trash that is generated by schools is, it's a lot. I can't comprehend that will be sufficient.
Yeah, and I can't speak to it either. We'll have to have the applicant address that.
That makes me very uncomfortable. The other thing that makes me very, very uncomfortable, and I recognize that I believe the striping at the end of the parking lot area is supposed to be the turnaround.
Correct.
I cannot imagine trying, and I know that Julie King brought this up in her email, but it was also a concern of mine, is I cannot comprehend getting in here and having people parked everywhere, all the teachers and everything else, and then trying to get back out, dropping kids off, which to me says that Marie Way is going to become a drop-off point, and we can't handle that with the buses for Horizon and the buses for Thunder Ridge. And I assume that there are buses that come to Head Start. I don't know that, but it seems like there are the little short buses associated with these kinds of facilities. Perhaps there aren't. I don't know that. But there's still going to be a lot of traffic associated with this. I'm very concerned that there's not a real turnaround, there's not a real way in and out, and a real drop-off area. So while generally they're making setbacks and they're taking care of the landscaping and they're taking care of all of that, I have serious issues with the traffic plan, and I'm very concerned about it. Was an actual traffic study done? Dave, do you know?
I'd turn that over to the city engineer for any review on that.
I don't have that at my fingertips. There would have at least been a trip generation study, and that would have talked about accessing, its effect on the city streets. And so I don't have an answer for you at the moment. I can search for that right now.
If you would mind finding that, I would love to know how this is going to affect this area. I don't know their system specifically, but I can imagine drop-offs and things like that, and if there are buses or not. I saw somebody shaking their head that there weren't buses, so perhaps there aren't. But if you could look that up for us, that would be great. Those are my main issues. I appreciate everything else they've done. They've made it look better than originally planned. They've got better landscaping and things like that, and they've taken care of setbacks. So traffic is my absolute #1 concern, and as it stands, unless I can get some assurance and clarification, I can't approve this the way it is because I can't see a traffic plan in place that would actually work and not grossly impact the rest of the neighborhood. Along with that, one of the other things that I think that we absolutely have to mandate somehow is that they cannot be going through the neighborhood. They've got to be just going back out on Marie Way, back out to 800 West, and it's one of those difficult things because I realize that those are technically public streets going through Sunset Haven, but the amount of traffic is through that area already is difficult, and we've been trying to keep the buses specifically out of there. So I don't know how we would do that, but those are my main concerns. So.
Do we know how many kids at a time? I know they have different group classes that they said it's not like a typical school where they're there all day. They have different sessions.
Yeah, they have 2 different sessions. And as far as the specific numbers, I want to say, top of my head, 16 at a time. Again, we'll keep this here for when the applicant comes up.
Yeah. So one of the things, I did do a little bit of research around Head Starts. One, I think it's a great program. I don't think that Councilman Barch is saying anything about the program or the service that they provide in all. Again, hers is all about the safety here. What I saw, and I actually went to another Head Start location, it was on the east side more, I can't remember exactly where it was and what city it was in, because sometimes when you're in Lehigh, American Fork, it gets confusing. But I noticed that the parents didn't come and have the kids run out to the car. The parents went in and got the kids, and so they had to park anyway. So I think that might take a little bit of the concern, because you're thinking pull up, get in, go kind of thing, and there's no real thorough way. So it is more of a parking kind of environment where they go in and get the kid and come out, especially when they had the issue with the accident. A child was actually killed in a parking lot. And so I think that they're really careful about getting the kid and bringing them out instead of having them running out to the cars and having even parents parking and then having them run out to the car. So that's how I understand it, and so that helps me quite a bit. I like the idea of we cannot tell residential or private people where to drive. We could tell buses because the school district can't go through the neighborhood. It would be very difficult to do you live in that neighborhood? If you don't, you can't drive that way. You have to go this way. So it'll be really difficult. I think it wouldn't hurt to ask. We can say if you could tell your patrons to please be courteous of that and use, and it's actually faster when you really think about it, when you can get on those bigger roads than driving, because it's a little bit of a winding through this neighborhood. But I think that red striping some of the curbs around here, a study needs to be done, not just for this, but even the elementary. We have Horizon Elementary, which is a special needs school. So we have a lot of really important young people from elementary to Horizons to Head Start that we need to be thinking more aggressively. And we're not big fans of red striping things, but I think this is where we need to maybe go in and do an analysis. And if we do a red stripe along Marie Way, that no stopping, not even to pick someone up if you were trying to do that, I think that could help mitigate quite a bit of the traffic. And I actually wouldn't mind seeing that all the way up past Horizons and even Thunder Ridge, where parents can't be parking on that road and then having the kids running through parking lots to get into the car. It is what it is. You want to pick up your kid and you know, they're not walking home from school or whatever, and you don't want them to take the bus, then you have to deal with the traffic on those other schools. So I think for me, I love the design so much better. Like hands down, this is going to be much better in this area. I do appreciate, and I went through the packet, complies. And we ask that of our people who are coming into the city to develop. Just please don't ask for exceptions all the time, and they aren't. And I absolutely get your concern. So I think that we can maybe work around it with they have to go in and they have to actually park and pick up their kids. The fact that it is 16, I think it was 12 to 16 if I remember. I just wanted to get a confirmation. That sounds really familiar to me, that we have that consistency of the parents going and getting in the kids and little preschool age kids and younger kids not running around. And then I also want to point out that this technically is a preschool, but it's not. It doesn't get the preschool protections because it's not charged.
By the definition, you have to pay a fee to use a preschool, so they don't charge for Mountain Head Start, so then they fall under the educational one.
Right, and so I think that we want to make sure that we are, understanding that we, as it acts as the same thing, but it's because they don't charge, right? So that we have some limitations on, and then obviously transportation would still be one that we have that. So I look forward to hearing from the applicant, some of these thoughts, your thoughts too, Shelley. But again, the design is so much better. Thank you. Done.
Councilmember McComber's comments around the parking, how that works, makes me feel okay with it. Other than that,
They'll confirm it.
Yeah, if that's the case. That's good, and everything else I'm comfortable with as far, and I liked your comments, Councilmember McComber, versus saying let's do some red striping right now. We always seem to have problems if we try to implement a traffic calming or other type of thing, but I like the idea of having staff go and do some type of analysis, whether or not, outside of this project, whether or not that makes sense.
The right timing, right?
Versus directing it as part of a condition for the specific thing, because I know we just always have issues where we're trying to control streets without all the information. So that's all I had.
Okay. Councilman Porter?
I don't have anything additional to add other than I would like to, I reserve the right to have something additional based on, I want to hear how many students they have based on how many stalls, to make sure that's adequate, and the staff members, but so I just want to hear from the applicant on that.
Oh, it wasn't on? Do I need to repeat myself?
Yeah.
And my name is Larry Krantz. I'm the facilities manager on Land Head Start. Glad to be here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and address some of the concerns that were raised. We would coordinate with the school district so that we're not starting at the same time that they're starting. We'd be flexible with our start time and end time. The most families that would be driving up at one time is 17 would be the most, because we're planning to have 3 classrooms, 1 extended day and 2 double sessions, meaning 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. But we would coordinate with the school, with their kindergarten in and out, so that we're not contributing to the already challenging transportation and
So when you
parking
say
issues.
maximum 17, because if people carpool, then it would be fewer, but if everyone brought their own car, it'd be a maximum of 17, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, because we would even start the morning, both classes, so there's 2 classrooms side by side, we wouldn't start them at the same time. We would start one at 8 and one at 8:30, for example. And so the maximum number of kids that we could possibly serve is 49. I don't know that we would get that many from the beginning, and the maximum staff would be 8. Some of them live within the city boundaries. We have one of our teachers that works for us that's here tonight that lives within the city boundaries, so I don't know if she would bring her car, for example, but that would be the maximum. And what were the other things that you were going to address?
Yeah, I was going to address some of those other issues that were presented. The trash can was the first one you mentioned, and we have an exactly similar facility in Orem, and we use 4 city trash cans that we take out weekly. Our staff do. There has never been a problem. We take them out to the curbside. And so, yeah, some of our... It's four, yes. Four city cans, and we have space for them, and we do have our staff take them out every week. So we deal with that just fine, and it's worked just fine. If we needed a 5th one, we would get a 5th one. But our experience is that 4 will probably be sufficient for what we need, compared to the facility that is identical to this in Orem, that we just built 2 years ago. And you talked about the parking turnaround area, and I think since we're not going to be busing, and even if we were ever to use busing, we have a 20-passenger bus. It's the very smallest bus you can have, and it would not ever drop off at Marie. In fact, we would never allow any of our parents to go out and drop off on Marie Way. We would require them to come in, and we do extensive training of all of our parents not to ever let their children walk in the parking lot without holding their hands, and that they actually walk on the sidewalks or the walkways as much as possible. And we're very conscientious about that and very concerned. But we would not even allow a bus driver to drop off out on Marie Way. He would have to drop off at curb if we had one. We do not have plans for one right now. We only we don't transport in many of our facilities, just some of our urban or our very rural areas. That talks about drop-off location. I think
During that extensive training with the parents, if you would mind telling them to avoid driving through the neighborhood, that would be greatly appreciated. We can't enforce it, but obviously I think your parents appreciate the service you're providing,
Right.
and they'd be accommodating, I imagine.
So we actually do home visits, and so one of our parents is here, and she can vouch to that. We actually do home visits, and we go over the pedestrian safety and the expectations for drop-off and pickup in the home before the first day of school
That's
even.
great. Thank you.
I might mention that there are many differences between a Head Start preschool and a district-run preschool, or even a private preschool. One being that we work with families. We have social workers. We have health people. We go out. We make sure that dental visits and doctor visits, because we feel like the health of the child is important. We train parents to be the primary educator of the child. So we go into the home and provide them with that sound basis. We are much longer. Go to a district-run preschool, that will be 1.5, 2.5 hours. Pineda mentioned that we are half-day, which is 3.5 hours, or full-day, which is 6.5 hours. And we are free as well, charge our services. You had talked about red curbing. Maybe I'm off base, but I know where I live in Orem, they have had problems around schools, and they post signs that say no parking during school hours on all of their schools in their city, and so that you're not allowed to park on the curbs at all during school hours. But we would love to.
Ours has been mostly staff not wanting to do that on that side of things, but that's an internal issue.
Yeah, and we don't want a lot of cars parked out there either. We want to be not an impact to the city as well.
It creates a blind spot for your people coming.
Correct.
Or not to have a bunch of people
parking on there either, yeah.
Right.
To address all of them?
I think that addressed them all. How many kids will you pick up?
Max 17.
Need to address that. Other questions that you have?
The max 17 without carpooling.
Do you have anything else, Councilman Porter?
No, just to follow up on that then, with 20 parking spots, you said you had 8 staff maximum?
Maximum, yeah.
And so that would leave 12. And if you're only having 17 at a time, I can imagine there's, going to be some overlap, but I think that's probably enough to accommodate
Some
your
parents
needs.
carpool.
Yeah.
I will mention the facility that we built 2 years ago that is similar to the, not only similar, building itself is virtually the same. We have many more parking spaces here.
You haven't had any trouble in Orem?
We have not had any.
Okay.
People carpool.
Yeah. I wish maybe that you could share your parent training on how to get your kids safely to school, because with the rest of the schools, because it's definitely a problem for every school, not just your guys' facility. And
I'm also the transportation manager. I didn't mention that. Too.
Okay. The trash, I think, has been addressed. So I think as part of being a good neighbor, I mean, you guys, I think, are going to have as much trouble when they're having an assembly at the school with people trying to park in your parking lot as the impact that you're going to necessarily cause on your neighboring schools. So
I have personally spoken with the 2 neighbors that are directly adjacent to us.
The houses.
The houses.
Yeah.
They were very amenable to us coming here. Some other reasons I talked to them, but they excited about us.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to them and doing that, because it's always good to be a good neighbor. So no more questions.
Okay. Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, I agree too with Councilwoman Cumbers wanting to have the study done on the road there before we just red stripe that. But agree that it'd be a traffic hazard having parking there. So I'd want to help out them with that. The only other thing besides what everybody else has discussed is the parallel parking stall, top right-hand corner, so northeast corner. Is that a parking stall, or, because it's shorter and it's also going up against, isn't that landscape rock?
Well, with that line, that's actually identifying an easement.
Okay.
Up there.
Okay. Will that create an opportunity for people to try to park there?
As it shows on the site, it'll be striped, and so obviously striping indicates you don't park there. We asked, when this came through the site plan review, I asked them to reduce. They actually have more stalls up here. I said, you're not going to need those really, most likely. And with the parallel stalls, you're going to need some turnaround room, so cut off a few stalls in the top there, stripe it to.
So that's pavement, but it's striping?
Yes.
And then, so I'm talking about the stall, that parallel parking stall.
To the right.
To the right, just
yeah,
below
that's not a stall. That line is for an easement. Just identifies where an easement line is.
So would that be striped as well, so they can't try to park in that spot? Okay.
Yes.
That's the only other thing I had.
Okay. Gordon, you had something?
Yes, I've got the key findings and recommendations from the traffic impact study. There are 3 of them. All study intersections are currently operating at acceptable level of service during the morning peak hour in the existing 2017 background conditions. That's one of the bullet items. Another one is the development will consist of a preschool with approximately 50 students. And the last one is all study intersections are anticipated to operate at an acceptable level of service during the morning peak hour with project traffic added, and that no queuing of significance is anticipated. Now, I believe the queuing that they're talking about, well, I don't know the queuing that they're talking about. My first reaction was the queuing of adjacent intersections. The report doesn't specifically address on-site circulation.
What was that?
I was going to say, I think that even though it doesn't specifically address on-site, I think knowing the number of students with the stalls and their methodology of bringing them in off of the normal school hours and staggering their start times, I think I've become comfortable with that, so.
Okay. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just so we're very excited to have a presence in the city. We're currently busing kids all the way to Pleasant Grove that live within the city boundaries, and that's quite a drive for a 3-year-old to go all the way to Pleasant Grove. And some of them are going to our Lehigh Center because there's such a big need. So we're excited to be able to provide the services to families closer to home.
That's great. Okay. Do we need a motion on this, Kevin? Yeah, sorry.
Do you want one?
Yes, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve Mountain Land Head Start conditional use permit and site plan, Sonia Benita applicant, 658 West Murray Way. Including all staff findings and conditions.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second, Councilman McComber. Any further motion, any further discussion on the motion? Okay, do a roll call. Barch.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Kadeska.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Just really quickly, there's a water issue. Contractor hit a culinary water line in the Benches neighborhood.
Spoiler alert.
What was that?
Spoiler alert.
I know.
So that's kind of what's been going on. I've stepped out a bit. We received notification that there was a broken water line up off of Grandview Boulevard. There was a temporary water outage, but we do have water in Zone 1 tank. And we have the ability to service Zone 1, which is really what that is designed to do, is service Zone 1. So for Grandview Boulevard, the westbound lane of traffic will be closed for probably the next several hours, but water service is continuing to operate at this time.
Are they coning the eastbound lane to
We're going to be directing
place?
people up Tanner or Lakeview Terrace. There's two roads into
bypass it.
Rather than, because of the light at Grandview,
Trying to split it hard.
we'll just split the traffic onto those different roads in.
And residents looking for updates, our communication, Dave Johnson's keeping city Facebook page up to date with updates, so you can go there for information. Yeah. Okay, University of Utah Medical Center, preliminary plat, phase 2. Was the contractor here, would like to come up? Applicant, not contractor.
They're not quite there yet.
That's an insult to be the contractor. I think so. Oh, I was going to say, I was like, that's an insult to your contractor.
I think he has more respect for his contractor.
So we got a few contractors that disagree with you.
So recently, you have seen village plan for phase 2 for this and approved it. And this is the plat that follows that, which actually creates the parcel so they can purchase it officially and move forward. So it is the second parcel for the University of Utah, preliminary plat for their medical center, and for phase 2, or plat 2 as it's being called. It contains 10.06 acres, 69.5 density ERUs, and 150, which equates to 150,000 square feet. The community plan, you can see Village Plan 2 was approved very recently, and then the Planning Commission forwarded a positive recommendation on this item.
Okay, do you have anything you'd like to say before, see if the council has any comments?
No, should I state my name? I guess I probably should for the record.
That'd be
Travis
great.
Perry, 4179 Riverboat Road, Salt Lake City. And it looks like I'm flying solo tonight, so I apologize for that. But we just want to thank city staff for their review of the plans. We have received their comments, actually already responded to those comments and resubmitted the plans. I appreciate your time as well, considering this item.
Yeah, this is great to see this project coming after a long time. Any council members with comments?
Just wondering if you have a time frame for breaking ground on one part or the other, what your plans are.
In order not to speak for the owner, I don't know, soon. The desire is to do soon. That's why we're in front of you today, actually,
Right.
with this parcel.
Okay.
My only question was, and maybe this was in your resubmitted plan, but the plat kind of runs along the line, and looking at this, it looks like it includes the roadway, but looking at the other one, it looks like it didn't. And so does this parcel include the north-south road?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have a name for that?
It is Federal Way, I think is what we've...
That's fine. I know that there'd been some question about the previous ones, so we wanted to make sure that the new ones were better. All right, that sounds
Federal's better than Crimson? On tax time. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I will move that we approve the University of Utah Medical Center preliminary plat Phase 2. Jonathan Bates, University of Utah, and Travis Perry, Somas applicant.
Okay, I have a first from Councilwoman Barch.
Second.
I have a second from Councilwoman Comber. We include all staff findings and conditions.
Now he shows up for the easy part.
All staff findings and conditions.
Including all staff findings and conditions, yes.
Amend that second.
Amended first, amended second. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilwoman Podeska?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Timing's everything.
Greg, you made that work. You made that work, Greg.
Okay, we will move to the joint development and reimbursement agreement with Boyd Brown, Resolution R 18-22.
So this is an agreement that we have seen for some time. Boyd Brown is here. If you have any questions specifically for him, what this does is it outlines the reimbursement agreements and things that we've been working on for some time relative to this project. There's, as always, the budget numbers are tentative. They're projected. They're based on what we think the cost will be. Obviously, our reimbursement agreements end up being based on what actual costs are.
Yep.
But this pretty much outlines those things.
Pretty boilerplate.
We did receive some of the exhibits last minute, so we would ask that, we have some flexibility if there's any tweaking that needs to be made on those, but fundamentally, this is consistent with what we've been talking about for some time. Kevin might have some additional.
Yeah, just real briefly, the form of the agreement itself is, it's a 4-in-1 agreement. So we've done reimbursement agreements where developer installs improvements, gets impact fee credits for those improvements. There's pioneering agreements where the developer installs the improvements and the city collects basically an assessment from each property owner that comes in the future. Then there's our standard development agreement, and then there's a fourth portion of that where the city is obligated to install certain improvements, subject to council approval through the budget approval process. So it was an agreement that I drafted, and it provides all the typical protections for the city in that agreement.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I motion to move, or to approve the joint development and reimbursement agreement with Boyd Brown, Resolution R 18-22, dated today.
I have a first from Councilwoman Podeska.
I'll second.
A second from Councilwoman Barch. Any further discussion on the motion?
Do we want to add direction that the staff has the ability to modify minor items if necessary?
Yeah.
How would you like us to state that?
Yeah, so that the exhibits we actually didn't, so these are numbers that we've been working out for a long time. We verified them, and we've just finalized kind of the actual diagrams of where those improvements are. And so those were not in the packet, but those are numbers that we've talked about. Any of these expenditures will have to come back to the council for a budget amendment, or part of next year's budget, for instance. So you'll actually see these costs come back at some point.
So do we need to add anything then to this motion?
So to just delegate to staff, working out the exhibits with the developer.
To also delegate to staff to allow for those exhibits.
Amended second as
We
well.
have an amended first and a second. Any further discussion? Yes.
We didn't let the applicant speak, but if you'd like, Boyd, you could have an opportunity.
I just appreciate it.
When we looked at him earlier, he ducked. So okay, roll call. Podeska?
Aye. What's his face?
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
He messed himself up because he likes to jump around, and you actually messed yourself up that time.
That was not a begrudging aye. That was just an annoyed aye to the mayor, so.
Okay, we will move item 7 up, special events permit application resolution R 18-23.
Whoever.
We're jumping to item 7.
Oh.
Really quick. This one shouldn't take too long. This is Ann's. Yeah.
Oh, I guess if you, we can.
See, I messed up, but I did throw Nora off, so we're good.
Okay, so Mayor and Council, this has been something that Ann and staff were working on before I even arrived, so, it's been about a year in the making. Ann's put in a lot of time researching with her counterparts in, I think, about 13 other cities. She's worked with staff internally to find out, pros and cons of what to put in the application. Interestingly, I did this exact same thing in Bountiful City and in my last city in Florida, and what Ann was doing pretty much mirrored what I had done in prior cities to help alleviate issues of kind of armchair quarterbacking how we approve events, if that makes sense. And
we'll still give credit to Ann.
What's that?
We'll still give credit to Ann.
Well, exactly. That's why I prefaced it with the Ann, is because all I'm doing is validating all the work that she's put in. And this is shown to be really effective in some of the things that we're implementing, and so.
What I heard is you said she was copying and pasting your work.
Well, Ann, I'll let you defend yourself if you need to. But that is true. Wow.
Right cooks so well.
Is there anything else you guys want to throw at me? Because I'm just
water bottles.
Tonight. I'm just glad we've reached this point of comfortability. So obviously I must be well loved. But yeah, unless there's any specific questions or anything Ann wants to add. So yeah, go ahead.
Just in the process of dealing with these myself, one of the things, and talking with other cities, one of the things they found that it's more beneficial to make your application process actually an education process for citizens as they're using it. And so I don't know if you had a chance to look through it, but with the questions we tell them, if you do this, this is who you have to contact and this is whose approval you have to have. And so it just kind of helps them, so as they're filling it out, they start to really truly see the scope
and the impact
the impact that their activity, because quite often I'll have citizens call me and just ask, and once I start explaining everything that goes into doing the scale of event they're wanting to doing it well, sometimes they realize it's not quite maybe what they were looking for. And so that was part of the goal with this, and that's something that is kind of an industry standard that's happening across the board, is to have your application be that educational process also for the citizens. And so I'm really excited about that, to really kind of help the citizens so that if they do something, it is done well and it is meeting those goals that they're hoping to accomplish.
Kind of building on that too, if you notice, the application is set up so that instead of having to provide the same information to different departments about things, we have one form that you fill out, and Ann is kind of that liaison, and then a series of questions so that it's triggers of, well, what do they need to do? And if it's yes on the first couple things and no on everything else, then we know it's not going to be a higher level. Plus, as you'll notice, the different level, we set events at different levels of requiring greater lead time, greater staff resources that are needed to process those types of applications. And we tried to create a cost recovery in the application process as well, because some events just take a lot more time. Also, one thing that Ann did really good acknowledging is we've got a lot of church groups out here, and so every church group that applies for a pavilion, we don't want to make them fill out a special event permit. So you look at that lower tier, the lowest tier, and it's like 200 and up, because a lot of church groups will have 200 or less people. So we wanted to be accommodating for what the needs were, so put a lot of thought into it.
Okay.
Sam, for any questions?
Councilwoman Barch?
Oh yeah, and the fee schedule is included.
I saw that, yeah. So you actually answered one of my questions for me, which is great, in your presentation. One of the questions I had is on events. One of the biggest areas that we've had of great impact in, I'm going to call them events, is the sports clubs who come in and take over our parks, even when they're supposed to be first come, first served. But I didn't notice that groups like that were included in this at all. I'm thinking specifically of Sunset Park, where we've had a lacrosse group come in and kind of take over, and it's supposed to be first come, first served, but they leave their goals there and things like that, and they just plan their tournaments and stuff. So is there something that we have done to discuss specifically that kind of event, or is that under a different?
Yeah, I would say if it's a one-time thing, they need to be filling out the special event permit, but if they're doing it multiple time, that's a different situation where they would need to work out if the city would even consider it something contractually with the recreation
So
department.
this is more of a, for the one-offs versus
Right,
something that's
exactly.
regularly scheduled.
If someone's leaving lacrosse nets at the park, would you please let me know, and we'll have those hauled off?
I would think that would be a code issue. Yeah.
So this is like one.
And that was happening in, I haven't had that happen yet as far as I know, but years past that happened, I know.
But as far as leagues using fields, that's a whole different ballgame. That would not be considered a special event.
That is correct.
So special events would be a one-day event, or maybe like a farmer's market that's over certain weekends, or maybe a 3-day event, or it could be a variety, but it's not going to be something like using the fields every
And
Saturday.
an event is typically an event that like a third party is coming in and applying to use space, but it is an event that is open to the public in general. When, like a lacrosse team practice, that's not necessarily, so.
Well, I don't think it's a practice.
Well, so, on piggybacking on that, like I used to participate in these were kind of one-off volleyball tournaments. They'd have a grass volleyball tournament where they'd just use a city park and set up tents for the day. Is that something where this would apply?
Yes.
Because it's just the one day,
That
one
one-off,
weekend or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess, we have the lowest tier requiring if your event's like 200 people or more, but, we may need to just put a little tweak of language in there, like if it's an official tournament and maybe they only have like 100 people, but they're going to require some city resources or something. We may want to just amend this to add a couple little language for those sorts of situations, so that's a good point.
You could bump a level 3 up to a level 2 if it's more intense use.
Exactly.
So just because you have only 200 people doesn't mean you're necessarily a level 3 event. That's what the staff review is for, because you may only have 200 people, but you're requiring all these other resources, so you may still be a level 1 event. Similarly, you may only have 50 people, but all the things that you're requiring in your event may require you to be at a level 3 or level 2. And we just encourage people not only to read through this, but if they have questions on timing of submitting application, that they just give staff a call so that we can kind of walk them through it. But this hopefully helps them walk themselves through it a little more.
So I guess to your point of a church group going out and doing something, and that's let's say level 4 for lack of a better term. They can just show up and do it, and they don't need to contact the city. I mean, I guess how are you going to know if they need to?
When you start getting down to that tier, it's a little different, because a lot of times the church groups are doing kind of a one-off thing. They're just going to rent the pavilion. They're doing, I don't know, a barbecue and maybe some games. That's a little bit different. I just would hate to. We have so many church groups doing activities. I don't think we want to bother.
I absolutely agree. I just if I'm a volleyball tournament organizer.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm only going to have 150 people, so I don't have to even bother with this.
To your point.
So how would you even know?
Right. And I think to your point, we'll put something like that, that.
Well, and I think we have.
Did we already add some language in there?
And that's why, so in the past event application, we allowed them to determine the scope, and this one, we determine the scope. Everyone pays that basic application fee, which is $25, and then staff is who determines from how they've answered the question based on, like you say, like not necessarily just the number, but the amount of city resources that are going to need to be there or that are going to be used, and then we go back to them and say, you are this level, this is what it's going to cost for the permit, these are the city staff that you are going to need, that's what they are going to cost, this is the total it needs to be paid before we'll issue the permit. Is kind of how that process will work, if that answers.
It doesn't.
I don't know that if I'm, like I said, if I'm organizing an event with 150 people, you're never even going to know about it because I'm just going to show up and do it.
Well, we'll make, like I said.
If I'm looking at this, you know what I mean? I think if you put something in there that says like, if you're running this type of event, you need to kind of at least tell us about it.
We'll make sure that that's a little more clear, because I think that's a good point, as well as you know, staff, we're going to work with them. Like, for example, if someone's like, oh, I thought for sure we were going to be a level 3 event and they're actually going to be level 2, and maybe they got their application, we're going to work with them. We're going to be understanding. This is just to kind of, like she was saying, educate them on how they should be working. And the next year, if they're going to do it the next year, they'll know. So we're going to work with them, you know. Not going to try and be Nazism about it, but we're going to try.
Appreciate that, for sure.
But from a clarification standpoint, I mean, we're not looking at renting out the fields for lacrosse tournaments and things of that nature. I mean, we're not wanting to, you know, lock up the field for exclusive use. That's not the intent of what we're going for.
Right, I'm just saying that, you know, if I'm looking at this, I could do it without even talking to the city staff. And then
Yeah, I've had to shut that down before.
I think there was some hot air balloons or something like that in kind of a spontaneous event. But the point being is we're trying to create a process whereby we can educate, we can work together. But I just wanted to make sure, though, that we're not, the policy here is not to kickstart, you know,
Yeah, we are
soccer
not
tournaments and things of that
renting
nature.
field space in any way.
Okay. I think this is good. You know, we just may want to, as topic, issues come up, we may want to tweak it to
And I think to
adjust
what
to
you're
problems we're
saying,
having.
some of that also might be some coordination with the ladies at the front desk, because they're the ones that take pavilion rental, and some of those questions are answered on pavilion rental, and so this is for the 3rd Ward or whatever, you know, or Pioneer Community Church, or, you know, just kind of throwing out, and so they can look at that and then pass it on to me, so then I can reach out to them and say, oh, actually, you're going to need to fill out a special event permit for this activity. So I think maybe that's just a little coordination that we can work on with staff, because they're kind of our first line of defense when it comes to that, because they're going to probably, they are going to at least rent a pavilion for something like that.
So it's a lot of it, what this process is about is not only streamlining the external understanding, but also trying to streamline the internal coordination, which Ann's doing a great job at. She's going to be that liaison, that point person, and managing this and working with those frontline staff.
I do have one quick question. This is for, because I see the first question, will this event be held on private property? So if we are on a private, in like a private home, and they're going to have, like in the backyard, they're on like an acre property. So your very first question says, will the event be on private property? So you're saying you have to get the neighbors and everything, but my question is, I'll be honest, with the HOA, because the Saratoga Springs development, you have, the entire thing is private. And they manage their own noise ordinance within the HOA. We don't police the streets. How is that going to work? For example, when they have the fireworks on Range Road, right?
So I actually have had that happen multiple times where someone has contacted me. I had someone in the Saratoga Springs development, they were looking to do an event, and I just said, you need to contact the HOA. That's all private property. And so anytime it's at an HOA park or anything like that, we always automatically just direct them.
And so we won't be,
And that's why that's
private.
the first question.
And that's why,
to get them out. Okay.
We know right away we can call them and tell them, pass it on to the.
Yeah.
Because it says here, provide contact information, written approval of the property owner.
That would be, for instance, I mean, this is a city event, but the night out before, or night out for crime, is that what? It takes place against crime, that takes place in Walmart, right? So that's private. So again, that wouldn't have anything to do with me necessarily, but like a block party where it's on private property, but it's going to spill out, then that kind of crosses over.
Okay.
And so that's why that question is there, because it kind of, if it's completely on private property, it has nothing to do with us. But if it starts to spill over into public property, then they might have to get us involved. And so that's kind of why. I know that question seems a little weird, and we've actually re-looked at it a few times, but yeah, there is a thought process.
The description makes sense, so thanks. I just didn't want Jordan Erickson getting on my case.
Yeah, no, and like I say, we've had Fox Hollow, there's been a few events in Fox Hollow and everything, and so, and like Chubby's had an event that I'd worked with them on, because at first they were going to cross over into public, and then after talking with me, they decided to structure it in a way that they didn't have to, so.
Like even the karate studio stays in the parking lot instead of going out. And,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do you have other questions?
No, I'm just getting ready to motion.
Okay. I just want to say great job on being thorough on this. It's right direction. I love it.
Councilman Wildens asked that I ask for a motion.
Oh. So are you going to ask for one?
Yes, I will entertain a motion from Councilman Wilden.
Whatever. I move that we approve the special events permit application, Resolution R 1823, dated today.
I'll second that.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, second Councilman McComber. Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call, Porter.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
In spite of what he said, I know you did more than copy and paste.
Most of this was created before he came online, so.
Annalise,
Thank you, honorable mayor and wise guys.
I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
Some ideas.
Okay, Nora, now we're here. Wildflower it is.
Okay, if you want to.
Nate, if you want to have a seat at the table.
So, when the city council on January 17th reviewed and approved quite a few plats in Village 1, there was a specific condition of approval added at the meeting that is up on the screen. It said developer will install and HOA will maintain a trail and access to the schoolyard in plat A1B in the environs of lot 907. Delegate to staff plat and trail changes along with any density and open space changes necessary to facilitate this change. So once DAI went back and started to look at this, they're more than happy to put in a trail and a connection or wherever. But once they started to look at it, they realized that the grades there's a retaining wall in that specific location, and that the grades might make it difficult to actually put a trail there. And in addition, there are concerns about a trail emptying on into a cul-de-sac just because of traffic issues. Often what happens if there's a connection like that on a cul-de-sac, that cul-de-sac becomes sort of a parking lot for pickup or drop-off or for events and those kinds of things. And so they are proposing a different location that would actually be in a different plat. I think, and Nate can speak for himself, but I believe that they are willing to do either. But just wanted your input, and because it was the condition was very specific, you would need to modify the condition of approval in order for them to move forward with it in a different plat.
Nate, before you talk, Councilman McComber had a comment on this.
Yeah, there's really no reason why we should have really much issue. We're still having a trail. It's just more appropriate location, and it's going, what's that? It's not an appropriate location?
So this northern area, if we do this option 1, actually isn't, because if you look at the grade coming down, that's coming up from, that's a huge grade change coming down to the baseball field, and then they have another huge grade change. So that becomes almost useless for those kids to come down. So I think there maybe needs to be some kind of a happy medium in between the two, and we can look at maybe someplace else. But that particular one makes me very nervous because of those grades coming down above the baseball field.
Okay, so I personally want to just say, put it where it's the most appropriate place, and why are we putting it in any specific plat?
Right.
It should just be,
A trail connection.
put the trail connection where it's going to be the best, most used, and safest.
Option 2 isn't the original location, right?
No.
Isn't it like down one lot, the original location?
Yeah.
It's in that area.
Down one line or
Yeah.
2
Yeah,
lines?
so the thing is, it's like, let's just get a trail where it needs to be, when you actually get in there and you start doing this stuff, it makes more sense where things will go. And the fact that, I remember when we did this A1B, I was like, why are we being so specific? Because we don't know how things play out in terms of all of the grade. I mean, I know a lot of the kids might like rolling down, but when it's snowing, that's not as much fun. Maybe they'll bring their inner tube and they'll just carry their inner tube home, right? But I don't know if the school wants that. I just think that we should just adjust the condition to just say that there will be a trail, there has to be a trail connection between the neighborhood and the school wherever appropriate.
Yeah, and the only reason I was so specific on that, Councilman McComber, and I'm totally fine with that. The only reason I was so specific last time is because I happen to know that that was the flattest place on the playground and the flattest place to get down to the school, which is why I said in that particular area.
But if they have to go through a retaining wall,
But,
it's not worse than an appeal.
and I don't know that there's a retaining wall. I don't know
Well,
what that retaining
and it
wall is.
might end up still being there. Maybe when we actually, maybe staff goes up there, they can walk it with them and they can pick it, and it still might end up being that spot.
Yeah, and I see the grading that's happening, but I think that's grading that they're doing with their development as far as making the roads.
So would the
level or
council be
something,
okay if we did it as Councilman McComber said, there has to be a connection?
Absolutely.
As long as Nora approves it?
I think the biggest thing is just make sure you're looking at not just on their side of things.
All the power's yours. But look at the school side, of
Yeah,
course.
Look at the school side also and where they're
The
coming
true
down.
walkability to the building of the school.
Okay, yeah,
And the
got
neighborhood.
it. Perfect. That's, yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
I will entertain a motion. Did you have something you wanted to add? Sorry.
No.
You were like anxious and I was just shutting you down.
Let me just say, for the benefit, because I have had some conversation with Councilmember Barch about this, and I didn't want you to think that I've ignored what you said. This exhibit was prepared before we had our conversation, and we left it because it was meant as a, maybe a visual aid for where we hoped it will end up. I think Councilmember McComber has done a great job in putting words to how the conversation has been with the staff. So I think our intent is to find actually an access point that's in between these two areas that are identified, but we'll need to sit up on site and make sure that it makes the most sense.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Wildflower Village 1 plats A1B and A3 modifications to be that a connection between Wildflower Village 1 and Harvest Elementary is put in place through approval from staff based on walkability between the school and the neighborhood.
Excellent.
Do we need to include the HOA maintenance since we're replacing the condition?
And then keeping all of the other maintenance requirements that were in the previous condition.
Okay. Have a first from Councilman McComber, second from Councilwoman Barch. Any further discussion on the motion? Badesca? Aye. Barch?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Mayor, if I can just make a comment also, I just want to say thank you because they've got their construction access like we asked that doesn't come through the neighborhood, and they've actually been really good about doing that. So I just want to say thank you.
We appreciate that. We are trying very hard
Okay.
not to allow any, we are building in the road. So we have had to take construction vehicles into the road while we connect to existing utilities, but.
That makes sense. I'm glad you aren't digging those trenches by shovel, hand. I dug the rocks out here.
Oh, I did too.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Do we move the minutes up or have Title 19 wait? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Code Amendment, Title 19, Ordinance 18-8. That's Nori, it's you again. There's been some requests from the council. We appreciate the developers and particularly D.R. Horton being here, but just kind of laying it out. This is a code for the entire city and future developments. This isn't just for this development. So while we appreciate bouncing ideas off of the developers who have been willing to participate to help us sound this out, this really is a citywide ordinance.
Correct.
And the discussion going on now.
Yeah, and we hope other developers will come in and apply and request rezones to this zone, or we can actually rezone property to this zone ourselves if we feel that's most appropriate. Since our discussion at work session, there is another option discussing the parking. And Dave, in the file, in the presentation file, if you get out of there we go. In the file, I've added a a Word document.
Well, you're pulling that up. I think this might be a good thing to be looking on our land use map as we're reviewing that, where this might be a good,
You're right.
even though that's not a zone entitlement, it's at least an intention of what we're thinking
Sure, yeah.
to encourage other developers.
So no, that's not it, Dave. It's another little Word document. Yeah. Okay. So this is language that was discussed with the Planning Commission. And as you can read, parking standards are intended to reinforce the transportation elements of the mixed residential zone, with its starting point being addressed by city standards as identified in Section 1909. Opportunities for reductions in parking requirements are encouraged and may be sought when justification for the reductions can be identified and approved by the City Council, i.e. neighborhood proximity to transit. So what this would do is, if this were the language that we decided to put in, it would allow it to be considered during a neighborhood plan when an application moves forward that way. So that's just another option for you to consider.
The only thing I would say is, instead of encouraged, I would say available, because we're not going to encourage it in every situation. We will encourage it in some situations, but just available if we're going to go that direction.
If we were, sorry, can I add something?
Yes.
If we were going to go that direction at all, like, it feels like a mission statement. It really does. Like, I'd prefer not to have that in code. Like, we can approve reductions and leave it at that. I'd prefer not to have mission statements in our code. I mean, that's just how it reads. Like, we're going to work together for the benefit of humanity, you know. It's true, but, like, we don't need it in our code.
By reducing our carbon footprint.
Right. I mean, I'm not trying to... Sorry, I turned off my mic. I'm not trying to mock it, but I just... By putting that stuff in there, it's...
I understand what you're saying. We could
put opportunities for reductions
Are available.
and
Right.
reductions can be approved by the city council.
Okay.
Well, to Councilman Wilden's point, we spent a lot of time cleaning up our code and getting rid of a lot of our mission statements over the last 4 years. I mean, we did. There was a lot of it in there, and we've been really making it more appropriate. Here's the facts, less ambiguous. So I think that's what really part of that too.
So if we talked about this already, and you talked about some of the Planning Commission conditions that they placed on their recommendation to you. If you want additional information on anything, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. But if, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the council for discussion.
We'll start with Councilwoman Bart. She started a page of notes.
If I can just ask some questions, Nora, on some of the setbacks and things like that. I guess I'm a little confused as to why some of these changes would exist. So for example, on the minimum lot size, why would we not have a minimum lot size? Because in a lot of these areas, we're going to be having footprint development, and so minimum lot size doesn't apply anymore. So I would think that in those areas where we actually do have lots, we would want a minimum lot size and coverage and things like that. So I don't know what the rest of council thinks about that. I would think that, please.
It's not saying that there isn't a minimum, it's just saying that it would be identified in the neighborhood plan.
Right.
But if you wanted to put,
An absolute minimum.
yeah, you know, if for single family, for a typical single family configuration, you could put a minimum if you wish.
I think a minimum, the more communication we give sooner in the process saves us nightmares down the road.
Yeah.
So I think that having something, to your point, Councilman Barge, up front, when they're doing this, the bigger picture, and then we get to the neighborhood, it's not like, oh, well, we wouldn't even have done this product, you know.
Well, I think a lot of times when we've seen a lot of very small product, and in reality, it should be footprint development instead. I think about one of the developers that well, most of you guys went on a tour, and I did my own separate thing because I didn't want to take 4 hours. But you know, you look at that product, and realistically, for me, honestly, I think that should be footprint development because it's it's so small and they're maintaining it anyway, it makes more sense to have it as footprint development. That's just me, but, and that's a very, very small lot size is what they're doing. I think it also helps with some of the issues of, is it a zero lot line, is it not, is there a use easement, is it there a blah, 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 whatever else. So for me, I would like to see some, if it's an actual lot, it actually have a minimum lot size that then negates some of those issues.
The minimum that's been suggested is 3,200 square feet.
Suggested by?
Very arbitrary.
By the Peanut Gallery? Is that what it is? Okay. So anyway, something to think about there that I think we need to discuss as council. Along with that, the maximum lot coverage, again, I don't see a problem with the 50% lot coverage because I think you get much more than that, and realistically, you should be going into footprint development anyway. So then also, as you're talking about some of the setbacks for the primary structure, I just question as to.
Just looking at which ones you had circled to see if they were the same ones I had circled.
So for example, in the front setbacks, generally on those higher density areas, we say 25 foot, 20 to the front plane of the building, and then they can actually encroach their covered porch or whatever else, another 5 feet into that, but we always go to 25 to the garage. If we are doing an actual lot, that would be the case. If we're doing footprint development on some of these smaller lots, you wouldn't have that anyway, because it's a footprint development. So why wouldn't we continue and just keep that same verbiage within the, this new zone? Likewise, with the 10 feet between buildings, 5 between the exterior walls and property lines, why would we not continue that language across just for consistency's sake? With the rear, again, per the neighborhood plan, I get it, but again, the more communication we have, and why would we not be consistent? Again, if we're going to be less than that, we're probably going to be looking at footprint development again anyway, where you have different requirements. And then there are some confusing things. So Nora, why, for example, on the interior side for the accessory structures, would we not have any setback at all?
So what?
Structured interior sides. I think I just probably forgot to put.
Okay. And then why would a distance from a residence for animals not be applicable when I'm pretty sure that's actually a health code item, a health department item?
I just didn't think that there would be kennels and things like that are not something that we originally anticipated.
They're going to have animals.
Right, but this is structures housing animals, so that implies.
Well, we've allowed for, in a lot of areas, we've allowed for chickens and bees and everything else in areas where, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so I think that we should be very similar, just the 5 feet from the dwelling and like we've had in other places.
Okay.
Just keeping it consistent, exactly. And again, in a lot of these situations, honestly, I think we're going to end up with footprint development because it works better. It lends itself more toward that anyway.
Okay.
Also, if I go back up to the primary structures, the minimum setback on the front, and this is just kind of a question, there's an asterisk by front that talks about the enclosed entry already, so I don't think we necessarily need to have an enclosed entry or porch may encroach up to 5 foot into the required setback because it's already asterisked and mentioned down below, or vice versa, take the asterisk and the note off. Right there, Dave. Yep. You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just a general code cleanup for us, period.
Okay.
Also, there was made mention in the Planning Commission meeting, making sure we're not double dipping on densities and things like that. We have had other developers at various times have one entity give density transfers and then have another entity pay for the land at full cost, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen in these kinds of scenarios. So if we can be very clear that not only will density not be calculated on sensitive lands, but also that they're either going to pay for the land or they're going to donate the land and get the density transfer, but not both. And that wasn't D.R. Horton, by the way. On uses, so both Councilman Porter and I mentioned the equestrian center. I think that probably ought to be taken out, even as a conditional use. I cannot comprehend having an equestrian center in this kind of...
I was wondering if you guys were planning an equestrian center and that's why you wanted it included, or?
I was just referring to all the other residential zones that are allowed.
Also with private refueling station, that's listed as a conditional use also. That also seemed like a strange use in this particular zone. The only thing that we've allowed that in this kind of a zone is the agricultural.
Electric car refueling station considered a private refueling station?
I think that's a parking stall with a plug.
Also referred to as a refueling station for an electric vehicle.
Is it really? So maybe we need to differentiate then, because I think that's very different than...
It's probably a new
Natural
category
gas pump.
we would have to
Yeah,
add.
because I thought that when we originally included this, we were talking about the bus yard and their natural gas station that they never did. But yeah, so I didn't know that that was what that was called.
And this came from the planning commission, so I don't have a problem at all.
Yeah, so I totally get having, you know, your plugs or whatever else at your parking stalls. That's pretty yeah, they're non-impactive, we'll put it that way. I don't know about environmentally impactive since still most of our electricity comes from coal plants, but that's a whole nother story. Let's see. Okay, other items, just the name in general. Planning Commission recommended that we call this mixed living instead of mixed residential, since we are wanting to have the options to have commercial. One of the planning commissioners who's done planning and also development in other states mentioned the fact that when a developer comes in, a lot of times they're looking at the zones, they're maybe not going to go into detail. So if we can have it mixed living, then it's going to be definitely a, hey, this isn't just residential. Just please no. Yeah. So I don't know if we want to do mixed living or something else. I think that was a fine.
Rose by any other name.
Yeah. If we can, also there was a mention of definitions of single family and multifamily, what we have versus what the applicant wanted in this case. Did Planning Commission come to?
They wanted not to have special definitions just for this zone, so we are not going to.
Okay, that was my.
Parking and building height are differentiated a little bit different, but that's, you know, we are not going to change those definitions for the purposes of this zone or this project.
Excellent. Nora, do you have the definition for residential signage as it exists in our current code, and then also perhaps the actual verbiage for it, as far as the monument signs and the heights, the residential signage is to the developments, and then also what we gave to Wildflower, because I think it was a little bit different than our normal Title 19 with part of their planned community.
I have to look both.
That's fine. I have no problem. I can let you do that while you're waiting. So, and then I think the only other thing is, and we just need to probably have more discussion on, is what do we want to do with the possibility of adding the verbiage of requiring a bit of commercial, but allowing that live-work product to fulfill that requirement. So that's my only other thing.
Okay, Councilman Wilden.
Okay, I'll just speak to my own units. We identify the maximum units as 12. We talked about that last time as not defaulting to start at 12. And I saw you went down to 10. I thought we generally, as a council, agreed at starting at 8, and you could get up to 12. And that's where I'd rather see it. And then in there, we also had a very specific conversation at the council, and I feel like the four of us, Councilwoman Barge wasn't here, agreed that to get from 8 to 12, it shouldn't be just transit. If we're going to make this applicable to everyone across the city, there needs to be other alternatives, and I like increase due to open space and or commercial, you know, and you can throw transit in there. Otherwise, this is just, it's not usable.
It's just a TOD.
For the rest of the city. So I like seeing 8 with the options up to 12 and including commercial, open space, and transit as different methodologies that could get you up to 12.
So you want sort of criteria something.
Something there, and that is what, and Council Member McComber, I remember last time, at least the four of us are here, generally agreed on the concept of going from 8 to 12 if it was open space, commercial, transit, or a combination, not just getting to 12 through transit type of things. Okay, were you in agreement with that last time? So I'd like that added in there. And part of it, to answer Councilwoman Barch's question, if we're using transit as an option to get up to 12, I think maybe the open space, they're doing an awful lot of open space. I could get them from 8 to 10, and then they're using transit to get to 10 to 12. But if they're using transit, I'd like to require some type of like flex space commercial like Councilwoman Barch was talking about before, because we don't really have a transit out there. And it can fit in an existing, I mean, when I say we don't have transit, we don't know if it's ever coming or not. And it could be 5, 10 years, 15, whatever. But, you know, to landowners' points and developers' points is we don't want to create a situation where you have unusable land forever and these type of things. So I think having a flex space, and Council Member Porter brought this up last time, is pretty specific. I don't think that got addressed. You brought up the mixed use. And this is what I kind of consider, I don't know if that's the right terminology, but mixed use, something around there. And then looking at table 90407 at the very top. What page is that on? It says 10-12. I know you're trying to show a range, but the way I read that, I thought about it initially, is 10's the minimum, or 8 would be the minimum, and then 12's the maximum. I don't, if they come in at this type of zone, I'd be okay if overall they're 4. They have some higher concentration over here, but much lower over there. So, I mean, I interpret that as like a range.
Where, I'm sorry, where specifically are you?
The very top of the table, 190407.
TV screen.
Oh yeah, the very top there.
Oh, okay.
Even though on the label you say maximum units.
It's the only one that's a range.
It's the only one that has a range.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe on the 5 stars, that's a lot of footnotes. But I'd like to see that change to 8 to 12, and then the 5 stars talk about it there. Being very explicit that that is not a minimum. I mean, it could be a great product if someone wanted to come in and do a wide mix. It may not work for a pending development coming in. That's not what I'm referring to, but just other developments that may come in. Where
So basically, you'd say the 8 is the maximum for starting.
Yep.
And then if you give us other amenities or improvements or whatever it might be, then you could work your way up to 10 or 12, depending on what that would be.
And my criteria would be open space, commercial, and if transit is, say, open space or commercial can get you from 8 to 10, and then one of the others gets you from 10 to 12. If you're using transit, I'd like to see, like, some amount of, I don't know the right terminology to use there, but like, a limited amount.
Some sort of possible commercial, I think, is what it is, and whether that be as a standalone or as a neighborhood commercial standalone or as a live work or whatever it might be. I mean, because there are so many options, right?
Yeah.
But as long as they have something included with that.
I think, you know, we're trying to leave it up to councils, both current and future. You know, it would be, you would bring in your pitch and say, this is what we're offering, and the council will say, well, that's worth 2 units more. But or if you're bringing something really awesome like a marina or something, maybe it's worth 4, so.
Yep. Marina and transit right away.
And again, I think we can make all of this work for the future development with not a lot of problem. The last item, because we addressed a lot of things in the work session, is section 7G III. I don't know what page that's on. Talks additional building height of 10 foot if it's not usable space or whatnot. I realize that the current developer wouldn't want to put that on top of apartment building, but technically you could, and so you get a 55-foot structure, which would rival a pending religious building. What are they going to put, an Angel Moroni on top of this apartment building? I don't know. It would just be kind of, I would prefer, well, I'm just saying it will rival a very high, if they put it on top of an apartment building. Sorry, that was a bad example, but it was a good example, but you know what I mean.
And that was not the applicant's request. That was something that I actually put in. It provides an opportunity for some additional.
And that's fine. I like the concept. I just don't want it to be up to 55 feet tall. So if they're going to use that additional 10 feet, I'd like to cap it at like 45 or something like that. But whatever, I'm not going to die on that item. What?
Well, I think what he's getting at is he just doesn't want it on the tallest building in the development.
Okay.
You know, if you want to put it on a clubhouse, that's fine. If you want to put it on top of the apartment building, maybe not so much. So we just have a max of 45 across the entire development.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I really like the concept. I just don't want it to create a 55-foot structure. If you maxed it out, if this additional 10 foot on something that's 35 feet, so your maximum with this additional height is 45, then I'm fine. Does that make sense? Sorry, that was totally convoluted.
55-foot lighthouse.
So anyway, I know most wouldn't put it on an apartment building, but you never know in the future. So those were.
Okay, Councilman Podeska.
With what already been said, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Councilman McComber.
So I did miss just a little bit, but I'm aware of a lot of the things that were being talked about. Either I've had one-off conversation or was able to, from previous conversations and previous times. So for me, with this, all of this zoning, I just want to make sure that we're making it so that it's applicable right across the board. So avoiding any kind of specific language is the concern. I haven't seen that too much. I read through it late last night, so I did fall asleep twice. Once last night, and then this morning when I woke up and started reading again, I fell asleep around 11:30. So it was really entertaining. So I think that really my biggest thing is making sure that we have as much communication up front as possible, minimizing the impact at the lower levels, and then setbacks. That was when I was trying to get to it. The setbacks, I think I heard you as I was walking out, you were talking about the setbacks. That is really one of my big concerns. I want to make sure that it's consistent with any setbacks that we have within our existing code. They're not getting higher densities because of more open space with this, and I don't want to do that. We got rid of PUD for a reason. PUDs, I think, should die on the vine, and they are dying on the vine. But we really want to make this an opportunity for people to have some flexibility in their development, and at the same time still maintain a good product for the city as a whole. So that brings me to my last thing. Councilwoman Barge did a great job bringing in pictures, and I really appreciated all those efforts, and I just wanted to have my voice added to the discussion. We require things in zones all the time. In our regional commercial, we require things to be done, right? In our neighborhood commercial, we require certain things that have to be done to meet the requirements. I have no problem having a requirement in here saying that there has to be some commercial component in this development, because especially with this transit corridor. Now, does that mean I don't have a problem if they want to put it anywhere in that development? I'm leaning towards yes. It doesn't make sense. It should be closer to the transportation corridor. But if there's a transportation corridor within a quarter mile, if you would, kind of thing, if any of its development, because the corridor is going to continue past their development, through Oakwood development, up past the elementary school, junior high, around Thunder Ridge, down by you. I mean, this is going to be all on there. And we really want to encourage the right long-term behavior, which we always say that we're trying to do. And so I think that you can meet the obligation through some of the product that Councilman Barch was showing, where they can be all residential, but it gets it on the books. It makes it so that the future neighbor, 20 years from now, who says, hey, I want to put a barber shop here at the bottom of my townhome, the neighbors can't complain because when they bought it, it's on their title and it says, this is allowed. And you can meet the obligation of having potential commercial in this neighborhood and technically never have it. It could still stay residential. It could stay townhomes that they just don't ever lease out, ever. But it allows the opportunity. And I really like that because my concern, I hate to see things getting torn down. And even if it's 30 years from now, I hate to see something have to get torn down because we didn't think big enough. And so I think that, they have the product. It's not even like we're making D.R. Horton come on spend hundreds of thousands of dollars designing new design. They have the product in their suite. You pulled their pictures off their own website. So I think that, with that double access and different things that, you need to have when you have it. So I just think that there's really a need on this transportation, to your point earlier, that you were sort of teasing them a little bit. You get the benefits for transportation, but you don't want to have any of the consequences. I think that we really, long-term, any other development that would want this zone that has a transportation corridor going through it, I would feel just as comfortable telling them that they should have some kind of, commercial component, whether it's through a standalone commercial or through a townhome. So that's just where I'm at. The flex space that you can have it be a barbershop or a salon or a insurance, State Farm. I even saw his little State Farm sign, on the picture. So I think that there's just a real opportunity, but it makes for good neighbors because then in 5 years down the road when someone wants to do it, it doesn't say, the neighbor can't say, oh, you can't do that, and they come in here and complain. We're like, oh no, it's right there in the code, it's right there in their permit when they built the house and everything. So
if you could satisfy it through the flex space.
Yes, I'd say it could be satisfied.
People would not absolutely have to put a commercial.
Yeah.
It's just
it could be a family office.
They could do, they could do their home office, they could do, their mother-in-law suite or whatever, because it's going to be on that ground
They could
floor
do their home
anyway.
theater.
They could do
Their
their
theater
home
in there.
theater, they
Yeah.
could do whatever they wanted, but it gives that opportunity.
And it's designed to allow it.
And from what I've seen in other areas, that kind of use is actually needed. That smaller office, that smaller type business is really needed. And here in Saratoga Springs, we're missing a lot of that.
Well, we just have a lot of people doing it. They just don't have the flex space. It's just out of their house, right?
If it's a home office, that's a little bit
Yeah,
different.
I'm just joking, but yeah.
It's the opportunity even to rent that space to somebody else's business.
Was what you were saying, 7 of the 8 we're actually doing. So I personally think this might be the compromise solution, so they still get their residential that they really want, but they can meet this requirement. And then down the road, when we get into the big interchange that might happen at Pioneer Crossing and Mountain View Corridor, potentially that potentially can be a pretty big transit location. That might be one of the bigger hubs because of people driving, being able to park and then get on their way. We're given that, we can now say, you need to have this here too. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Porter.
All right. I think a lot of what I had questions or concerns about has been talked about. One was in the setbacks table, since apparently we all have to at least hit there once. The street side setback, I was just trying to figure out, generally that's there because of the site triangle is my understanding, and so I don't know why we would want it to be less than 20 so that we can preserve the, the ability for people to see what traffic is coming. So that's my personal opinion, or my thoughts on that one. I guess, I would echo Councilman Wilden's thoughts on having the lower as the default, and that, the developers can have to bring more to the table if they would like to exceed that. And to Councilman McComber's point, he was talking, and at first I was like, well, I disagree with that, and then he kept talking, and I'm like, well, I agree with that. So I'm not sure exactly which interpretation is the right one, but I'm not in favor of requiring commercial for every development in this zone. Because as I talked about, I know that a certain development that is coming in probably won't take advantage of this particular zone, but I would like to see other developments, especially from SLR, perhaps just come in under this zone, and maybe commercial's not appropriate in those. And so I would like to preserve it as a primarily residential with the option for it. Now, if we're going to talk about a specific development, aka this one that D.R. Horton is proposing, yeah, maybe as part of that neighborhood plan and as part of that, well, you want more than 8, we can then require the commercial or the flex space product as part of that discussion.
Councilmember can I ask, Porter, can I ask you a question here? If we had it as required, but then allow for a variance to waive it if it doesn't make sense. Because really, we're talking transit corridor, right? It makes sense for most of transit corridor.
Yes, for the transit corridor, but not all of this product is going to necessarily fall on that transit corridor.
So maybe tie it to.
If you're getting a bonus for transit, then you also have to have some of this.
I'm raising my hand.
Because that makes it optional.
Yes,
Other places required here.
My statement before is if getting from 8 to 12 part of the additional amenities is transit, I'd like to see it required for that.
Yeah, and I guess I can see that, and that's kind of where I was like, at first I was like, well, wait, what are you saying? So I wasn't exactly sure what.
It's not including transit, and required if transit is part of your.
I'm more comfortable with that.
And that's what I was originally proposing. If we're getting more open space, or we're getting like a bunch of commercial, whatever, that's beside it. But if you're using transit, that's where I.
Right.
Well, maybe that's how open space gets you to 10, transit gets you to 12.
Right, and so that's.
Or commercial.
That's just my concern is if we're, requiring it, then all of a sudden this basically just becomes a TOD zone. Because then only transit is going to be viable. So
conversation, the discussion, so that we can figure it out.
Yeah. So I like kind of this secondary discussion of if you're going to have the transit as one of your amenities that you're bringing to the table, then we could require the commercial. Yeah. But I do like the idea of the flex space because that does give that flexibility. The big concern I think from one particular developer was that it's just not ripe. It's not ready. This will either it is or it isn't, and if it is, then it'll work, and if it isn't, then they've got an extra room in their house.
And they can wait 5 years.
So those are my thoughts, and there you go.
Okay. Nora, do you have questions or?
I just have one, and Councilman Barsh, this is probably a good question for you. So, and I can do the research as well, but on the flex space, what do they do about parking?
So the ones that I have seen have had parking associated with it. It can be used as visitor parking, or it can be used as their commercial parking, but whether it be parallel but set into the park strip area, or if it be 90-degree stalls, however it be, but they have those have had
so a
additional
driveway
parking.
maybe, or
so the ones that I saw, every one that I saw was all rear-loaded product. And then they had parking in the front that addressed, part of the road. It's actually either if parallel inside of the park strip or head on, either way. Okay. But that was the parking for the live work unit or the guests, however that was.
Well, and I mean, from what I'm seeing here, you've got an insurance agent and something else at the end.
Yeah, there's a dance studio in there.
None of these are high traffic. There's such a small space that you're going to have one, maybe two.
Well, and I think that's the benefit of having the neighborhood commercial uses attached to this, is all of those are smaller type uses.
And what if it was within a certain proximity? So I'm referring to like the mayor's comment before, is maybe they could put some additional parking in the corridor. the Mountain View corridor, and so if it was in a reasonable proximity, there's additional parking over there, and.
Not in the Mountain View corridor, in the.
The transit, not Mountain View, sorry.
That's a little
We're
way
not
away.
running Mountain View corridor through your property, don't worry.
Surprise. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Did you find out on signage, Nora, did you find that?
No, I haven't had a chance.
Okay, because that was, I think, one of our last conversations, is we need to decide what we wanted to do on.
And I don't know if we ever talked to the mayor's comment, but I would be supportive of something like that, where, with the parking in the apartments, where we put that parking in the transit corridor, so when the transit corridor comes through, it may wipe out that parking, but now it answers that need.
In all likelihood, they would just use that parking. I mean, they'd add it to theirs, the UTA.
Right.
Well, except for I don't think that the corridor itself is wide enough to do that when they put the train and the road and everything else through.
So, but theoretically, I mean, the road widening could come along before you're ready to transfer it to like a BRT or something like that. So it seems like we could be painting ourselves into a corner where we're creating a parking expectation that would need to go away, because let's say it becomes like well, it's going to be the extension of Pony Express, right? You probably don't want a whole lot of parking along that road, and by creating the parking expectation there now, we're going to have to come back and kind of unwind that particular issue. So I understand what you're suggesting. If it were separated space and space that could, logically not have that transition problem, I'd agree with you. But as we add lanes, and lanes are not necessarily equating to TOD or to transit, we're kind of shorting ourselves on the long run.
Well, and I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole. My point was, if there's parking in a general proximity, maybe there's a visiting apartment by the apartment buildings, and a street and a half over is commercial, one of these, there's parking relatively close. I don't know. That was just my thought.
And then in terms of the signage, I had that one, I sort of threw it at the very end. I'd like to hear from the rest of the council if they kept it at the 10 feet, not going to 20, but then allowing some kind of logo of some sort up near the top. They felt that would be something that they could work with if we kept it minimal on the fontage and things like that.
I get that. I wonder how we would do that with the content issues that we have with signage. When, is there a way that we can differentiate between a logo versus a sign?
Can we limit the number of letters?
Well, that is a really good question. Mark and I were just talking about that earlier. I'm not sure. I don't know that I have an answer. If all you're saying is they can have like an artistic drawing versus actual verbiage and words. In some ways, I could see that being content neutral, and other ways it may not be. So I don't know if that would pass constitutional muster. Even if it does, really it comes down to, and I sent a memo to you before about really what is the standard of review? Is this going to be a strict scrutiny review? Is it going to be an intermediate scrutiny? So the standards really apply, even if you are completely content neutral on regulation, makes absolutely no sense and it's prejudicial and things like that, you still can't regulate that. It still has to pass a certain level of constitutional muster. So this may fall under intermediate scrutiny, so I don't know. I'd have to look at that and research it. I don't know.
So maybe as far as that aspect goes, we talk about where the actual signage goes, and we can come back on that portion of it after he does more.
So the code says for residential signs, for a residential entry feature, each residential developer is permitted one residential entry feature per primary entrance, spacing of no closer than 100 feet. The sign portion of an entry feature for residential development containing fewer than 100 dwelling units shall not exceed 7.5 feet in height. The sign portion of an entry feature for a residential development containing 100 units or more shall not exceed 10 feet in height. The residential entry feature structure shall not exceed 20 feet in height.
Okay.
So the structure, according to our existing sign standards, the structure can be 20 feet, but the sign has to be no more than 10 feet.
We're saying we're willing to go up To the
So-
max height of the.
Yes.
Height of the tallest building.
So
but keep it
if,
at-
what did we do with Wildflower? Because they had the planned community, and it was a little different.
Yeah, there's, I believe,
I was thinking it was a little bit taller also.
I mean, for me, the question, I guess, is how can we allow for them to put a logo up there that's not part of the sign? I mean, I think keeping the sign, you know, North Shore Farms or whatever you guys are going with.
Not farms.
Just North Shore, apparently. At 10 feet makes sense, but being able to put your buoy up there with, you know, some of the theming also makes sense to me.
Giant seagull.
Yeah,
But how do we get around the content issues?
Don't call it a logo, just call it an artistic.
Let me just point out the definition of sign in the code.
Beholder.
It says, includes the use of lettering, words, pictures, or other graphic depictions or symbols that qualify. That's the definition of just what a sign is.
That sounds like Rebecca.
Can we change the definition of a sign?
Did it say artistic feature, what he just read? We can just call them artistic features.
Just like we call things in the parks amenities, right?
Yeah. I just think we were sort of whispering here, I think we overthink this sometimes, and I think that obviously we want to be careful and, you know, protect ourselves from constitutional. I always love it when we throw out constitutional this and that, it throws the big flag and scares everyone. But at the same time, if there's very few two-letter combinations that would be really offensive, and if someone came forward with that, I'd like to see how many units they'd sell in their neighborhood. So I just think that we just need to just be a developer. To your point, I think, Chris, you're just basically saying that it's like it makes sense, so let's just move forward. That's just.
Well, it definitely wouldn't be lit at that height. I mean, it would just be, yeah. So then the only question I have is on height. How do we do that?
What type of design feature? Sorry, I know this isn't for one developer, but I can't say. Type of artistic feature.
It looks like they're LF, their legacy farm.
that
They want
it?
an N and an S, I'm sure, something like that.
So the logo that you've seen, that has the, like the side, it has.
On a diagonal. Matches their legacy farm, L and S. They just want an N and S.
Some type of artistic feature that contains letters that's no more.
Why not three?
Because we're gonna stop at 2.
We don't-
Seriously, I mean, that's.
I'm just curious.
I
Three's
don't
an
want
odd
someone to
number.
put bugs out there, so.
It's just.
Yeah.
The N on changes the context.
it's 29 feet Wildflower.
They have like a flower at the top, right?
Yeah, that's like.
They have Wildflower at the bottom. Yeah, and then they have a flower at the top.
I like yours.
Okay.
An unlit artistic feature is
That contains no more than 2 letters.
that apparently contains no lead.
Can they have symbols, pound sign?
Emojis?
Throw something at
Hashtag,
him.
you're lame.
Throw something at him.
The mayor told me to throw something at you. So.
No,
I have a motion.
Let's move forward.
So, okay, so then just height-wise, do we want to say to the maximum height allowed in the zone then? Or do we want to?
Building in that.
Because maybe they only have single-family homes, I don't want to.
Then it should only be 35 feet tall, monument.
But not to exceed 45.
Not to exceed 45 in any case, but if they only have single-family homes, let's say, like, not theirs, but why would they need a 45-foot monument? Then it'll look like this huge
Pillar poking out of it.
Washington
With an
Monument.
actual sign.
As you're driving by, it's still going to look like that.
Yeah, but at least it's keeping it at 35 feet because the buildings are 35 feet.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Just
I just like your approach saying whatever the highest.
Because what we did for Wildflower isn't their maximum height. So that's not being very consistent.
Well, in this one, the applicant aren't they asking for 5 feet above maximum height building for their monument?
Is what?
No.
5 feet above? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they haven't, I mean, we don't have a neighborhood plan yet, I don't know.
Well, the lighthouse, wasn't that?
It would be less than.
It's less than 45.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, and that's, that particular case, honestly, you could make it into a building and then you can have it at your 45, whatever. But that's, that's a whole nother
I
item.
just like the consistency, and then I think it makes it easier going forward versus having these one-offs.
Right, but then again, with the consistency, then what we did with, for example, with Wildflower, we told them 29, even though their max height is still 35.
So then maybe we can come back and
They're not in the mixed residential
They're not-
zone.
Yeah, they're in their
use
whole.
zone.
They're in their own zone. But again,
Are
just
we
for
changing it to
consistency.
mixed? What are the?
Mixed living?
What's the deal with that?
Does
Just so
living
that-
still
so
imply
that the
houses,
developers
dwellings
coming
though?
in that might want to look at it and know that it's not just residential, but they have other options, is what the planning commission was talking about.
I'm okay with either. Let's give the planning commission a win.
Okay. So, sign, say what your final is. Mm-hmm.
Height of the largest building in, tallest building in the, that they're requesting, and the sign,
Can only be 10,
it can only be 10 feet
well,
tall.
I think it's per our code, right? So if they've got less than,
10 feet.
Yeah.
less than 100 units,
It's 7.5.
then it's
Yeah,
7.5
then whatever.
if it's over 100 units. So just like our code is.
Same as code, but they can have an artistic feature with no more than 2 letters.
I don't-
I mean, I'm just trying to negotiate.
Yeah.
Kevin will have to give us some advice on that probably.
Yeah.
Fine, okay.
I'm sorry.
So you've got that, you've got the parking, you've got the commercial. Are we at a point where you can give us what we've said and pass this, or do we need to come back and have it finalized? It's probably what we.
It's up to you.
I say we
certainly.
try and do it, and then in the minutes, we'll be able to see if they missed anything. You're good, you've got good notes.
So, Nora, with the change in the title from mixed living, mixed residential, mixed living, from a planner side, does it, or Dave, from your experience?
I mean, it's what you guys want. When I heard him say mixed living, to me, that still tells me mixed types of residential uses. I mean,
But
To
we
some
also
extent,
use that to describe nuts, mixed nuts. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, we also do mixed use and everything else. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, to some extent, this should just be revamping our mixed use, is really what this should be, instead of creating another zone, but.
Again, it's kind of your call. I don't, it's ultimately what you as a council want to do.
Mixed residential. I think where we're saying residential, but you can add commercial if you're doing transit or whatever, that's pretty obvious to them that, oh, hey, if I want,
the primary use is going to be residential.
Right, so I'm okay.
Marketing perspective. They don't get the win. I'm just kidding.
And there wasn't a condition. It was definitely discussed, but it wasn't specific.
Oh, okay. I don't know, I think we should try and do it, and, because we need to move forward.
Yep.
And then in the minutes, we can catch this, if we all make a commitment to really review it, to make sure.
Sure.
Typed up, you can type it as we go?
The whole thing.
Well.
Kayla's freaking out right now.
Can we maybe take a recess here and someone type up the condition?
Can I ask this question? I think Nora's a phenomenal planner. I think she's very capable. If you want to try and do it tonight, that's great. Is there a compelling reason? I mean, help me understand. Is there a compelling reason that this must pass tonight?
No, I'm seeing no's from people in the audience.
If that's the case, then I would just say, let us work on it, let us bring something back, and then let's not rush it if we don't need it.
Okay.
And I would feel more comfortable with that, quite frankly.
All right.
Perfect. Okay.
I'll make a motion then.
I will entertain a motion.
I move that we table our Code Amendment Title 19, Ordinance 18-8 dated today until our next meeting in order to allow, is that enough time, Nora?
Yeah, oh yeah.
In order to allow staff to make the changes that we directed.
Okay, I have a first from Councilwoman Barch.
Second.
I have a second from Councilman Porter. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, Podeska.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber. Barch.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have the approval as noticed on the minutes for March 2018 and March March 20th, 2018, and March 27th, 218.
I move that we approve all of the changes and the minutes for those two dates.
Okay.
I'll second.
I have a first from McComber, second from Wilden.
That was including the changes that were sent in?
I said with all.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
I want to make sure.
Podeska.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We do have need for closed session.
I'll move that we go to closed session for the reasons outlined in the agenda.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman, a second from Councilman Porter. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
You can say unanimously.